Hey everyone, give us just a second. We're still trying to get everybody on. How's everyone doing tonight?
Hashtag! Pew pew!
Thanks,
Choo
Mystic.
choo!
Oh, yep, that would do it. I have a bad link on that GIF. See if that works next time. Oh, nice, dude. Out of space. Space. Alright, let's see. Move this sucker over here. Oh, let's here. Alright, there we go. Now I can see you guys. Oh man, I like the forest. I've gotten all the triumphs except for the ones that require PvP. So those just aren't gonna get done. But you know, whatever. I think Beard is going to be. I assume he's just running a little bit late. I know he was kind of feeling a little under the weather. But Green is out. So if I absolutely have to, I can probably do this one, or at least do a portion of this one by myself. But hoping to get. Yeah, I think so. Let me double check. I was having some really good runs with the Verdant Forest. The nice thing about the Verdant Forest, I think, is that like once you start getting into the groove, it's really easy. Like it's really easy to get through. See though, I have Bountiful Spring, so I probably should just go ahead and finish that one. Should go pick up those dailies. No, the competitive one is the one that I'm like, I'm only at like 2. I should go pick up those dailies though real quick now that I looked at that. I was working on the invitation right now. Yeah, I really like the tower, or the whatever it is, the tower that they've redecorated, because the audio is really cool. I think they did a really good job with the audio. I like having like the ambient noises. It's really kind of fun to listen in on. Yeah, actually, if you guys want, here, I'll kick over. While we're waiting, we can just watch, because I'll just be playing anyways. Oh yeah, did they? Because they fully disabled it in competitive, if I remember correctly, right? Because it was something was buggy about it. I'll be honest, I do like the fact that I can update or upgrade. I need to buy the fusion rifle so I can get that unlocked. Um, I do like that you can buy the unlimited grenades. I love that. Yeah, no, I get you, Pins. I get you. Probably just delete all this stuff. Yeah, I need to probably sit down and go do Gambit for the lore. Bleh. I pinged Beard, so we'll see if he can get in here or not. Ah, I'll go back. Oh, there he is. There he is. Oh, Pins, you got the Chronicler all done? Nice.
Must be nice.
I need
Also,
to.
congrats.
Yeah, I need to go and figure out a way to sneak through Shattered Throne to get Wishender. Because that sounds like something I really want to do. Not at all.
That'll be me.
Not at
this
all.
Tuesday.
Yeah, I think it's.
Literally.
Is it Tuesday that it reopens? I need to. I didn't do. I need to still go do the Ascendant challenge for this week. Now that I'm actually at a level that I can. Oh, you finished the Gambit piece for Chronicler. Yeah. Well, still, congrats. Because that's the part that I'm like not looking forward to either.
I'm actually surprised how quick you can kind of get the.
Did they up? I thought someone
would
say, yeah, because Man with No Name is the Gambit Prime, right?
Yeah, and the other one, it seems like you can get between typical plays as well. Don't mind me. I'm just snorting cocaine. Kidding.
It's it's Pixie Sticks. It's okay.
Yeah, Also, seriously, don't get the cops on me. FBI, open up! Anyway.
Gunk, 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 gunk. Oh God, Beard, no! Dreaming City was really fast. I need to buy this before I forget. All right,
Yeah, Dreaming
there.
City
Now I have,
is like
now I have the
super
tree.
easy.
I need Tangled Shore to come back up as Flashpoint though, because
Yeah.
I need the what is that? That's not Lawless Frontier. It's fuck. What is that one? Whatever, that one. That one book.
That place with the thing.
Yeah, the egg hunting with Wishender is what I have to also get done.
Yeah.
So, Beard, how's it going?
You know. Just
still alive?
Crazy week, and it's really not over yet. So you know.
All right. So, what's the cool thing about this Arbalest thingy bopper?
Well, it's the fact that it's a linear fusion rifle in your kinetic slot. That's what everybody's like super excited about.
Oh, man, I can't even change the picture to the shader on it.
Yeah.
That's
Because
dumb.
there's gonna be some ornaments for it. I have a feeling, but the fact that you can't.
Well, but
like,
you don't even have a
ornament
slot
and
for the
change
ornaments.
I know. I don't understand. I don't. It's like they wanted it that particular way.
I know,
and
that's what I'm like.
That was it.
Most Loyal, that's the one that's on the Tangled Shore.
Yeah, next time that's up
That's
for
next. Yeah,
Flashpoint.
I was about to say
My...
that's where I'm gonna be. I'm gonna be hanging out at Lost Sectors, just going dunka 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 back and forth.
Yeah, just a little bit. Now I need to remember which book I put this one in.
Dun dun dun.
Oh, hey, I found it.
Beard problems.
Beard problems, yes, when you've got 6 different handwritten books all filled with tiny little writing that you need to read later on.
I do have to say that I really, really like the little horns for the revelry. I think that
I never got
absolutely hilarious.
Yeah, I haven't gotten them yet because I'm a lazy schmuck.
Let me see, because if you put...
Also, fair warning, chat. I have the windows open. I have the fan on. Cars will probably be super loud. It is already way too humid for this time of the year.
I love the fact that you can
Obviously-
change the side, the like points of the horn based on how much of the armor you're wearing.
Mm-hmm.
I know, yeah, Rose. I'm the same. I wish that they would last beyond the event. That makes me kind of sad, but
I'm surprised that they wouldn't have it be like a thing for just that armor, at least.
or yeah, I mean, well, because it already is, but I mean, or
Yeah.
at least like have something where you can trigger it, like
Right.
you know, like there's something that you can. I don't know, because I think I just again
I don't know.
really like them.
I just kind of think that there's ornaments that they could use. I don't know why they've never used like ornaments to change the look of something. I don't know. It just seems like it's an open possibility that they could.
I see
that
those
they could
horns and
implement
want to
this
ask
system
what
called
tree you'll be rubbing those on.
ornament.
Oh, you know. Bow, chicka, bow, bow.
Giggity.
But they're also cool because they are like the exotic ghost projections. They change based off your subclass.
Right.
Boop, 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 boop.
I kind of like how that happens because the ghost projection.
It took me a while to figure out that that's what it was doing. I was like, what
doing.
is it? What is? How do I change? Because I was like, is it based off shader? Is it based off like? Oh my gosh.
Well, I'm gonna say that
let's see where
it just shows how in tune the ghost has to be with the guardian, basically. Which again, they I feel like they respect themselves a lot more than we give them credit for.
Yeah.
Because they do little things like that, and it's just like, well, duh, they're trying to make the game elements work within their story and their generalized lore. Like, come on now.
Oh, there are wings too?
Yeah.
What are the wings on? I didn't see the wings. Is that on the chest? I don't have a slot for... Is it... Oh, is that the Eververse set?
I think so. Because I know it's on armor. I just don't know particularly what armor.
To the Googles!
To the Googles. So I ran Bagusia earlier this week with a bow frame. I got the Masterworked bow.
Oh, nice.
It is super good. It's super good.
Oh, okay. So you can get... There's 3 different ornaments? Oh. So you can have ears, horns, or wings. Okay.
That makes sense.
Revelers
Yeah,
assortments.
Pens,
Okay, the item descriptions. Okay.
you're not wrong, but it was also supposed to be cooler today, and it is not. Apparently the front that was supposed to move in was either deflected or pushed back from the mountains, but
Nightshade,
it was not good.
they come from the, I believe it's called, I'm gonna make sure I get this right, Revelers
Should be
Assortment, which
it
is
should be the box from Eva.
yeah, you buy the box from Eva, and it has just pretty much crap equipment, enhancement cores and ornaments. And apparently, I think the ornaments are supposed to be the rarest, but that's where I got the horns. I got the horns from the assortments.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
Shay,
need to. Oh, go for it.
I just kind of wish that they would add like all of the Black Armory weapons as like a possibility for you each week at this point. Like they would give you 5 ballistics logs every week, so you can go and do each of the frames to try to get something at this point. So there's no reason not to.
I still need
With
to
the
unlock
amount of
all
other
of
like,
them.
yeah, with all of the with all the possibilities for powerful gear at this point, I just don't see a reason why not. It also, I think, fixed a lot of people's whining and complaining for the fact that they don't have Jotun yet. Which I completely understand as an avid Jotun user. Well, Pens go do Pergusia. That's exactly what I do, and I would argue to
Which
say that
one's
Pergusia's...
Gofanon's the one on the EDZ, right?
Gofanon is the first one on Nessus.
Okay, I haven't
It's the
unlocked
one
that
with
one.
the Fallen.
I unlocked the one. I've only unlocked the very first one.
You've
I think
only
I have.
done Volunder?
Huh?
You've only done Volunder?
The which one?
Volunder?
Yeah.
That's the first one. It's you're kind of killing me here, Blue.
Well,
It's,
you know.
kinda,
It wasn't
killing
until
me here.
recently that I even was able to get up to level. So, because Season of the Forge was not kind to people who played solo. Nor was there really much that I was really interested in. But I'll be honest,
You take that back.
Nah. I'll be honest, the Verdant Forest is fun as hell.
Mm-hmm.
Like even solo queuing it, and even with like some I've gotten a number of people who are AFKing it, but you know, whatever. But it's even then it's like it's just fun. Like it's just like I love the hidden chests like that you can find and everything. And and there's like I don't remember it because it wasn't it the Halloween that they did a similar thing.
Yeah,
But
it was
the one that Halloween, it was hard to like get into the groove. I felt like this one is much more easier to get into. I don't know. I don't know if anything changed or if it was just like the ambient noises that make it.
well, the biggest thing that I will say they changed is like how you see everything that's going on, which kind of helps. But secondarily, they don't have the 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 dark blades popping out of nowhere.
Right, yeah, or the random screams in the middle of the night.
Yeah.
Nightshade. A lot of times, what people do is they'll just queue in and sit there because it's got a time limit of 2 minutes, and then it takes you directly to the bosses. And basically, if you can chain it down, if you can get a boss down in less than, I think it's like 45 seconds or a minute, if you don't do anything, you can just basically farm boss kills, which is basically what it is.
Yep.
Of course, it's a pain in the ass because those of us who are having fun running through it are dragging you through. So, I've been reporting people, but that's just because I'm like, I don't really appreciate AFKers as a person who's playing by myself when it's kind of rough when you get into a strike or something and someone's doing that.
Yep.
All right. Let's get everything. Well, okay, so this week we're not going to do the top 3 because Green's not here. She is visiting. She's taking care of family. There's just been some rough stuff that they're going through right now. Everyone's okay, but it's just rough patch. I think she mentioned her sister, the thing with her sister's wedding last week, and then there's been a couple other things that have happened that it's just a rough week for him. So she's not going to be able to jump on tonight. So like I said, we will move top 3 guilty pleasures. We're going to do that next week, and then we'll just basically push everything back 1 week, which works out because we weren't going to have a poll this weekend because we're going to do extra lore review on Anthem next week anyways in the chat. So it works out all good. That being said, let me go get this door closed real quick, and I will be right back, and then we can jump into it.
Sure. Oh, anybody get a chance to watch my new video at all, or any of my new videos at all? I'll give you like a month's window there. It's more curiosity than anything else.
All right.
Yeah, Black Flag. I've seen you on there a couple times.
For what? Oh,
I was asking if anybody had a chance to check out any of my new videos at all last month.
I have in the last month, yes. I haven't gotten a chance to check out the one from today,
Okay.
but I plan on it eventually. Okay, let's see. What do we got? All right, get this recording going. And
Yeah,
we are
I gotta say, give us a 3, 2, 1.
off to the races. Oh no, I got it. I'll just do the voice because there's only the two of us. It'll just segregate it anyways. So we're good. We're good.
All right.
Good.
Boing.
All right.
Boing. I was gonna do my noise cancellation.
Oh
and
my
the whole
gosh,
nine.
he was gonna do all the work for me, and
I was gonna make it nice and easy, and you just spit in my face. Like I'm trying to take away some of the work on you.
Oh
or
my gosh,
something.
no, my work. All right, guys.
All right, fine. You be that way.
All right. Welcome back for episode 165 of Focus Fire Chat, recorded live on April 19th over on twitch.tv/FocusFireChat. As always, I want to give a big shout out to our live chat here with us tonight. Thank you so much for joining us once again. Our topic for tonight's episode is going to be a look at the lore book For Every Rose a Thorn. But first, let's run through a quick introduction of those on the show for tonight. As always, this is your host, Blue Crew 86, and then next up, and rounding out our usual team, we have our good buddy, the lore content cop himself, Beard Grizzly. Beard, how are you doing today?
You cut out what? Oh.
Has-
Oh no. Okay, well then, I guess we'll just go with I feel like people in this town, I swears. Yeah, fair warning ahead of time, guys. I've got my windows open because, you know, it's the northeast of the United States, and it can't be April without it being, like, ridiculously humid already, apparently.
Moisture is a thing.
Moisture.
Well, and also, you know, really quick, obviously Green's not able to join us this week. She had mentioned last week that she was going to be out of her. She's going back home to take care of some stuff for her family, and so that's where she is this week. So obviously we didn't get a chance to get a question out. And also this week, just a heads up, we aren't going to have a top three. I was telling live chat that a little bit before we started recording. We are going to be doing this week's top three. We'll be doing it next week, and then we'll just kind of push everything back 1 week. So nothing big, no big worries there. But if you guys get a chance, definitely give Green some love and support over on Twitter. I know it's a little bit of a rough patch that they're going through right now. But also, big announcement not big announcement, but big heads up for this stream. Similar to last stream, I'm going to just put a blanket spoiler warning on this entire conversation because I don't think Beard and I are going to want to dance around a lot of things, and there's some things that are pretty crucial to the conversation that if you haven't read the book, which I really encourage you, if you are starting to listen to the episode right now, and you haven't read For Every Rose, I would really encourage you to go read it by yourself first. We will be talking about it kind of in depth. We're going to probably just jump right into the conversation because Beard and I have been waiting very patiently for this opportunity ever since the book kind of became available. It is on Ishtar. As always, I will link it in our show notes over on the Lore Network. So it'll be there for you. But yeah, I really encourage you guys. This is a big development in the story of Shin Malphur, Dredgen Yor, the Shadows of Yor, all of them. It's a very big chapter. It's not necessarily a conclusion, but we're getting to a conclusion of some of those chapters. But yeah, so just a general, hey, this is a heads up. We are going to be talking a little bit of spoilers. They're technically in game, but people are just now starting to finish the book in game. So if you're one of the people who would like to acquire it in game before reading it, just a heads up, you know, this is one of the ones that has been available on Ishtar.
I don't know what you're talking about. I got it done in 2 days.
Well, okay, that's true. You are, yeah, that's. I wasn't very far behind you actually, but I think I was giving. I was giving you grief while I was doing the same thing, and then at the end of the night, I checked and I was like, oh, I have one more to go. Like, I was like, all right.
You're like, how? I don't understand. And then you read your book and you're like, oh, never mind.
I'm like, I still don't understand how it. I'm like, whatever. The mechanics of getting it unlocked. You just shoot things. That's all it is. Which I really like how you get this particular book. I'm looking forward to maybe getting more of these books like this or more entries like this, because it makes you feel like you're actually you're learning about the weapon that you are using. And I know there's other games. I think, doesn't Monster Hunter have similar lore developments within the weapons?
Not really.
Okay.
No,
I know there isn't there. What was the other game that you mentioned?
There is one other game that does it very well. Do you want me to relive that 4-hour memory?
Which one? Oh, Nier. Okay. I'm like, which one is that? I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, 4 hours.
I mentioned this like way back, like last year, and I said how it would be really cool if, when all is said and done, they would add in a system that would allow for lore to build from the weapon that you're utilizing. And this is a step in the right direction. So if they absolutely utilize a system more like this and kind of build on it more, I would love to see that. Because it was something I had said about a year back and gave the suggestion about a year back in a video. Hey, maybe you should put this in because it makes sense to allow for us to either play with or get used to a weapon or try something out that we otherwise wouldn't use. Now, obviously, with Thorn is a weapon that a lot of people have a lot of connection with, sure. But imagine if they did something like this with Darcy. Even if it was like 2 extra entries or something, it would still build on the story of what Darcy is all about. And it couldn't even be, it doesn't even have to be like in the initial launch of that weapon. Like, that's the best thing about this kind of system, is that they could technically keep building onto the book from it, from there with it. So yeah, I would love for them to kind of expand on that system a little bit further than what they already have. But just saying, this is all my idea. No, nobody else's. It was all my idea. Kidding, obviously.
Well, obviously you can tell that we are both pretty invested in this particular one. So let's run through our standard intro notes and then we'll jump right into it. And this week for Lost Lore, what I was thinking we were going to do, actually, Beard, I know I know that you and I have had this conversation quite often.
Yeah.
Purple and I have had this conversation quite often, but the concept of perception and the importance of perception. Because guess what is really important to keep in mind when you read this book? It's the perception and the interpretation of information. And this is a big thing that they are kind of doubling down on here. So with that being said, I'm going to kind of reiterate some stuff that we talked about in our, we did a Let's Chat a while back on retcons. And there was a couple things that I said that I kind of want to reiterate. So one of those is that, and Beard, if you don't mind, I'll just jump right into it real quick. Oh. So I said perception is one of the many cognitive biases that has a prominent place in the world of lore analysis and just in general analysis, like just text or anything. In analytics, you have to have awareness of different cognitive biases. And there are a ton of cognitive biases, but perception is one of them. And namely, the expectations for the inherent nature of game lore as a source of frustration in the community is what I'm seeing. And Beard, again, this is something that Beard and I have both talked about. I know Purple, Ishtar has an amazing podcast. Wow, I can't talk. Ishtar has an amazing podcast, not just about cognitive biases, but also about the validity of the information that I will link in the show notes, because I cannot stress how much or how well done Purple, Kex, and Baxter did on those episodes. But the thing that I'm noticing, or the thing that I've noticed over the last couple of years with Destiny, is that, those who approach the lore looking at the information as a biased presentation from the start, they're not as annoyed as those who approach this with the idea of, or the view of, the lore being canonical. Now, when I say canonical, my meaning in terms of Destiny's game world is that the concepts are not subject to change fluidly or to be open to the interpretation of either an NPC or a player or the player. So basically what that means is if you're looking at information in Destiny or any game, right? If that information or conceptualization of the game world is fluid, if it paints, if it's able to be changed somewhat easily, this actually points to that aspect being a derivative of lore, not canon. And canon is something that's like it's something that is static and not changeable. I mean, in game worlds, that's not a lot because, as with the work of stories, a lot of things are able to be changed. Retcons happen in everything that we do as far as storytelling. And it's not always a negative thing. And I will definitely defer back to our Let's Chat episode on that particular piece, because we actually go into the various types of retcons with regards to storytelling. Within Destiny, what we deal with a lot within lore is basically mythology. Myths and legends. Wow, I'm having some trouble talking. And the thing to remember about myths and legends are that they are stories. Because of this, they are always going to be faced with some degrees of, air quote here, retconning. And that's not in the sense of what's usually viewed as negative retconning, which is the reverse retconning, which is where they go back and they take stuff out. Retconning is, in this sense, actually more of a clarification. You'll see this whenever you have a series of books. You see this where you will have, so like if a good way to look at this is Tolkien, okay? The Hobbit. All right, we have The Hobbit. Pretty basic story, right? Adventure, done, end of story. And then comes the Fellowship of the Rings, not whatever. But within the story arc of The Hobbit and the Fellowship of the Ring, there is actually a significant amount of retconning. And what that means is it's retroactive continuity. Retroactive continuity is simply a matter of clarifying past events to make it synergize and make sense within the current events of the story. So no matter what the context, stories, myths, and legends, all that, they're going to have degrees of retconning. And this stems from the fact that they are, at their base level, meant to try to make the chaos of life make sense. That's kind of the entire point of myths and legends. But the thing to remember is, even when they're cleaning this mess up and simplifying it to make it more accessible to those who are perceiving it, the tales still need to contain some of the mess, because that's what allows them to be relatable to those who are being taught. Right. This audience requires a connection. And the reason why they require this connection is kind of twofold. They need it to stay entertained, and they need that entertainment factor is what basically drives the ability of an audience to stay interested in the story. This requirement connects back to the historical use of mythology as being basically a method of instructing younger generations lessons learned by the older members of other generations, or in any given society. You will always see this in any society. Every society has a form of teaching through mythology, whether that is a religious connotation, whether that is supernatural connotation, whether it is, even just pragmatic. There's a lot of storytelling that is used to teach the younger generation. Mm-hmm. And this is where we see the presentation of bias, because this also presents the bias that is present in every story. It is not possible for someone to escape bias, because bias is quite literally a part of your paradigm, which is a concept of your worldview, how you see the world. That is part and parcel going to have a bias, because you are, by just the very nature of perceiving it, you are looking at it from somewhere. And so this bias, it's the thing that it's a double-edged sword, though, because you're not going to be able to avoid it, but you are able to recognize it, and you can, to a degree, recognize to neutralize it. And this is very important within what's usually referred to as scholastic research, or analysis of text of various different contexts either historically, culturally, geographically, whatever. Because the person who is analyzing the information has their own bias. The text that they are analyzing has its own bias. It has an agenda. There is a reason why text is created. Beard and I both write extensive notes. Our notes, if we ever were to give them to someone else, might not make sense because the bias that we have a lot more information banging around in our heads when we write our notes that when we look at our notes, it sparks that memory. Someone else doesn't necessarily have that information, and it would not necessarily connect the dots the same way. So basically, the thing is that perceptions, bias, all this is very important to not just accept, because it's going to be there. That's the thing, is like at the end of the day, it's going to be there. So you should just accept it. But also, if you can identify it, then you can also start seeing a more clear picture of what's going on. And so the whole thing that this is kind of to tie this all back into Destiny is my argument that, the continuity issues that we see in Destiny, we do have a few. But the thing is there is the case, a very strong case, to argue that those continuity issues can be viewed as in-game bias or in-game certainty problems due to the contextual situation that the characters are relaying information to our character, rather than an out-of-game writing mistake or laziness, which I have seen being thrown around quite frequently. And it's not just with Destiny. It's anytime you have a continuity issue. Yep. And so I want to encourage, before we really get into the meat of this particular conversation, because there is going to be some, I know everyone hates it when I say that, but there is going to be some retconning going on here. But the thing is to keep in mind with the whole thing with Shin here is that Shin calls it out point blank, and there's an entry that's called The Pain of What's Right. And he basically says, let me pull up the paragraph just real quick. He says, I've played a role for some time now, many actually, but my names, Shin Malphur, the Renegade, various others handed down by fools and hard cases, or even the one or two I've hidden behind over the many years I've spent running from my past and towards an ever-darkening future, they all serve a purpose. And they all start with Shin, the poor, lost, lonely boy whose entire world had been taken from him. The tale of my youth and Palamon is all true. That it tends to elicit sympathy and set my story on the path of the right and is not just a ruse. I am right, I am just. But ask yourself, did the fact I began as a victim color your perception of me? Is my path, my cause, more righteous because I was owed justice and vengeance? For the longest time, I thought so. But then, and here is where the truth of it all begins to gain focus. What if the villain of the story believed so? What if the villain tore apart my life and countless others as a terrible means to an end? What if I was lost and he offered guidance by gifting me vengeance? What if I told you he was right to do so? That's kind of where I'm going to end this particular one, because I think I honestly, I can't think of a better way to kind of segue into our conversation about what the information that we have within for every rose. This is going to be probably an episode that Beard and I are going to. I won't say we're probably not going to go on too many tangents, like off-topic tangents, but there are probably going to be tangents within this story, because this
There's
story
enough referential material,
right?
Just thanks to the fact that, like, from Age of Triumph, we had like The Last Word and a couple of the other included grimoire cards, along with also the stuff with like the original Shadows of Yore and whatnot as well. There are these pieces that we need to kind of dig into a little bit further to sort of dig up or figure out where certain pieces might be going. For me, the tale makes sense. For others, I know that they're not exactly too happy with the way that it's all perceived or transpires. But per our ideas on Lost Lore here today with perception and such. That's the trouble.
Mm-hmm.
We saw one half of the conversation with Shin Malfur this whole time. We had no general idea about many of the others or any of the others realistically. We also were unsure of like who was semi-involved with, you know, who or what or how. But there are still a couple of unanswered questions that I'm sure many of you guys might have if you remember some of the older, like Shadows of Yore entries and whatnot as well. But yeah, there's, to Blue's point, it's not going to be tangents as all of a sudden I'm going to start talking about the 9. It's all of a sudden I'm going to go back to like old material that we've had from like The Last Word or Thorn or these older Crucible cards that existed previously. And all of them, I think, are extremely relevant to the topic, of course, that we're going to be after today. And not just what is showcased to us with Every Rose in general. Which, by the way, if you've been able to avoid this spoiler at all, big props to you.
Kudos
like,
to you, man.
I am a general master of avoiding spoilers. There were like 5 people that spammed me the first day that this book was out. They're like, "Oh my god, look at this!" And I'm like, "What? Oh, really? Thanks." What do you think? I'm like some kind of space magic idiot that could go ahead and read everything in 2 seconds? Come on. Anyway.
I mean, they wouldn't be wrong.
I guess. But that's the major thing. I want to highlight the ideas of perspective, however. If you are also to kind of further onto Blue's points as well, if you are calling a retcon, be sure it's a retcon. If you are calling a change or why something could change, provide evidence on why you think that is the case. Because I'm going to be blunt real fast with this right now. If you can find evidence counter to it being a retcon, and just a matter that you have a skewed perspective, then that is your bias. And that needs to go ahead and shift in your general mindset. It's all it kind of comes down to. Like, I don't care how high and mighty that ends up making me sound to some people, but long story short, if there's evidence that shows and can dictate that there is a lack of evidence that it's a retcon and it's a clarification, then that's a completely different definition.
Well, and I think also there too, Beard, is the open, and I know we've had this conversation, you and I have both on here, actually recorded, and also offline. I mean, we both kind of, we have the very similar approach, which is I think why, even though we disagree with some things, we actually don't get mad at each other, which I know, shocker guys, the Beard and I are actually friends, even though we don't agree with stuff. I know it can happen. It does happen.
Yeah, it's like, it's like him and I don't get along on every point, or don't know, generally think on the same things, but it's like all of a sudden we can still talk to each other like rational human beings. What is this world? Is
well, and I was going to say,
I mean, I had to go ahead and check about like remakes and everything that were happening. Like, wait, what's going on?
There's a single player game coming out that doesn't have microtransactions. What? No, but I was going to say is the other thing to keep in mind too is that Destiny is actually really, I wouldn't say it's a one of a kind, because I don't know, I don't have the experience to say that, but I will say that it is a strongly unique portrayal of how to tell a story. Because the thing to keep in mind is, in everything that we talk about from a storytelling perspective within Destiny, there is very, very, very few pieces of information of primary sources that are actually canonical in nature. Everything that we have is predominantly portrayed or relayed to our character by another character. And I understand the need for people who are trying to escape reality by playing a video game. I get that. That's very frustrating. But the thing is like, that's what honestly has kept me invested in Destiny for 5 years now, It hasn't been the game. I'll be 100%. It hasn't been the gameplay. Those of you who know me from, Rise of Iron know that I stopped playing for a good 6 or 8 months. But I came back every week and we talked about stories. And that's because discovering the nuances and discovering the twists and turns of the story, like this one that we're going to talk about, was what was causing so much interest and so much passion for me. And so the thing is that you can relay. I can tell you one thing, and if I tell you, X, one person's going to interpret it differently than another. Both of them, technically speaking, are correct in their interpretations because it is not necessarily going to be objectively true. It's a subjective recounting of a event. And so that's where you kind of start coming into cognitive biases. And this is something that, as a psychology major, and as also with my experience where I went to school, we had to deal a lot with an analysis that was dictated through other people's encounters of events. We refer to them as phenomena, which is where the concept of phenomenology, which is a school of philosophy, comes from. And so this whole thing, it really makes sense to me. And I have always approached things with it. I also understand where if you're not thinking at it from that particular degree, it's very frustrating. It's very, very, it's these concepts that are presented as abstract truth, which are not actually abstract truth, are suddenly being changed. And I can understand how that misperception can cause frustration. But that's why I kind of wanted to, do kind of a long wind up there, because there are things that are going to get pulled out from under you on these particular, especially on the saga of yore, as I've come to call it. Like, there was the whole, he's a Titan, not a hunter, except he's not really any because he was before Guardians, which we did get confirmation of with Drifter actually today. Yep. Was it today that we got? He does not have a class. He is referred to as a light bearer.
It was yesterday.
Jonathan? Or was it? Okay, was it yesterday? Okay, yeah, because it was with the TWAB. Okay.
I was going to say, because if it was today, man, I put that 30-minute video.
I know, yeah. I was like, say, oh, that's right. Yeah, it was. Oh man, gosh, man, my week has been kind of hectic. But yes,
a week? I only know how days go together. That's all I understand anymore.
I know that there's a sleep thing, and then I get up and do stuff, and then there's another. Yeah. Well, there's usually a sleep thing again, but sometimes there's not, and there's a lot of coffee involved. Okay,
To the Vex, time is non-linear, and that's about what it feels like my life is anymore. It's just this big ball of wibbly-wobbly, timey-wimey stuff.
But and another thing actually to kind of really bring it back into Shin, right? Another really cool quote is from A Matter of Trust, which is the first entry, and I love this quote. And he says, "A person, any person. Our lives and deeds live beyond us, our moments making us whole, our actions carving our being into the endless expanse of existence. Even after death, we were here. All we do can be forgotten, but it cannot be erased. Every life we touch alters the course of another being's reality. That reality then shapes the world around it, as all we are ripples out beyond who we are." So this is where you kind of get into the concept of, it's kind of similar to string theory, chaos theory, the Mothman, their Mothman prophecies and all this stuff. All those crazy talks and all this stuff is kind of what he's talking about. If you ever drop and a very, very cliche example, very common example is go to find a still body of water. Drop a pebble in it, and then throw a pebble at the other end, and watch where the ripples intersect and see what happens. They bounce off each other, and they go into new directions, and all of these really cool little images start kind of being made through those two disturbances. But those two disturbances, there's not an additional disturbance that's creating these, tertiary disturbances, and that's where we're kind of seeing here. And so what this is kind of leading into is there's kind of three major points, and Beard, I'm going to kind of say, and I want to hear if you're okay with these. There's three major things that I kind of want to talk about, especially. the truth of Shin, or at least some of the truth of Shin. What that truth means, with especially in particular to the shadows, because there's something that's gonna change there, and then also what that truth means for us and our future within the Destiny universe, because we already see a changing universe with the events of the Drifter, especially in light of what was put out by the devs yesterday. They're kind of doubling down on this whole thing. And so I think this is going to be a very, very prominent conversation that we're going to be having more and more. And I'm really excited about that, because this is getting into morality and philosophy, and this is going to be fun. So to kind of
say where I think the Black Armory papers gave us a story that we sat back and thought about pretty heavily in relations back to history that we've been like pining for forever. This one actually deals with like present day, past day, and into the future as we go along, like all of these different revelations that could pop up as we continue with the game and its life. Like, it's such a the whole point of Destiny 2 is to kind of talk to you about what it means to be a guardian. And as Fellwinter said from our talk last time, I don't know any better human, any better way to express it as a human.
Yeah.
In this case, it'll be as a guardian, but
Well, and that's right. And that's the thing is, so when we talk about so when I talk about the book, we have 9 entries. I'm just going to do a quick breakdown of the book real quick. I have 9 entries in this book. There are 2, 4, 5 that are written from Shin to the Guardian, or involve Shin and the Guardian. And then there is the extra 4. And this is where we're going to double down again. Just last reminder, spoilers here. Those last 4 are the final 4, well, the next 4 pages within the Book of Unmaking. Okay? So, kind of give you an idea of where we're going with this. Shin is very, very closely aligned with the shadows. And actually, we go to find out that Shin is actually one of, if not the creator of the Shadows of Yore. And we start down this road with the matter of trust. And so the entire thing throughout this book is Shin doesn't trust anybody. And Shin is now trusting us with a truth that he has hid from pretty much every single person, every single guardian that he has ever interacted with. No one really knows this fact about Shin, except for us. Now we know. And that's kind of where the book ends, is he reveals it. He bears this truth to us. He finally lets us see the cards, or some of the cards that he has in his hand. And now it's up to us what we do with that. And that's where the book ends. And I really, really am looking forward to that particular piece of this conversation. But really, honestly, to kind of cut it to the quick, Shin is the leader of the Shadows of Yore. But he is also the man with the golden gun. So he's playing both sides here. And this is where we see the involvement of Tebben's notes. So the entries to the Book of Unmaking are interesting in and of themselves. I'm not going to spend too much time delving into those particular ones. I kind of feel, Beard, and I think you will agree with me. I think now that we actually have arguably the full Book of Unmaking, we might want to switch back and do an episode just on those verses.
I feel like we could do...
I feel like we could probably do 13.
Yeah, realistically. But I feel like we could do like one synopsis, if you will, of like the time... Because that's what we can at least kind of dig into at the entries, at least, is like the synopsis from Tebben himself.
Right, and I think the synopsis... Right, I think those are very important. And that deals
at least with like what Shin was doing, or what the man with the gold gun was doing, and then what Orsa was doing, etc. But then I think what we can do is at least take, like you were kind of hinting at here, just take the entries, as you have already graciously done, and
I
talk about
I
those
will
in an
I will
episode
also
on their
link
own.
those. Yeah, I will link those in the show notes as well. Basically, what I did was I told Beard, I was like, I'm getting tired of jumping between pages to figure out which verse goes where. So I just basically took all the chapters and verses and put them into a single document. And I'll have that. I'll put that in the show notes for anyone who wants those. Just it's basically the entries to the Book of Unmaking and the verses for each of those entries and the understandings without any of the synopsis notes from Gray, without any of the different cards. It's just all put together in one document, which makes it a lot easier to read and do analysis on. But so
one of the other reasons too that we want to highlight that the what was it the 11th understanding, I think, was the original 7th Book of Sorrow entry that we had gotten from Thorn.
I think it was the
So the
13th.
11th or
Actually.
the 13th?
13th.
I think
13th.
it's 13th.
Yeah.
Yeah.
13th. The rending of one's enemies.
Yes, that's it. That's why I think it's very important to highlight the Book of the Unmaking, because we've already seen an entry from it previously from way back when.
Right.
And it's also a confirmation of the quote-unquote Book of Sorrow instead of just the Books of Sorrow as written by Oryx, to almost suggest that there are the 5 verses or 5 pieces that we got were from Oryx himself, and now these are from a different contestation altogether. But I still really wonder about the origin point of this book. That is something that I don't think we still have fully explained, outside of it just being along the path and whatnot of what Yor had done. It's still confusing to me because I still question like how valid the book really is, or how much of it is them writing a Book of Sorrow and trying to make it look like they had actually done something to follow along with Yor, that this is a master plan. I'm getting ahead of myself.
Right.
You
Oh
can
yeah.
probably
Like
already
yeah.
see where I'm going with
Yeah.
this anyway.
Yeah. No, and that's the legit thing is now, because again, we have a person now who just admitted to deceiving not just us but everyone. And so now he's asking for us to trust him. It's like,
Yeah.
so that's a question for, you as a guardian, you as a person. Do you trust someone who comes forward and says, "Hey, I've been lying to you. And I've not just been lying to you. I have deceived you significantly."
Possibly the ultimate lie of all times for Guardians.
Right. And so then that person turns around and says, "But I need you to trust me, because this is what we're doing. This is why I've made this lie. This is why I wove this tale. This is the deeper connection, deeper meaning of what I am trying to do. This is the path that we are trying to walk, because we know that not everyone can walk it. It's a dangerous path. And so I had to lie." But so the question is, do you trust that person, or do you follow that person? Even better, right? And yeah, Black Flag in chat. I mean, the speaker lied to us. I mean,
I was gonna say, talking about perspective pieces on like what kind of information you actually take it. And to be fair, I have to call him out as well. Only because, or really, I'll call out the big 3. The 3 main warlock thinkers of Toland, Osiris, and Ulantan. All of them present us with philosophical ideas and natures, etc., that present themselves. This is just another perspective in the long basket of everything. The only difference is the 3 amongst the 4 of them that kind of have showcased full identity so far have been Osiris with the Vex and fighting them back. Toland by being rended by Crota and subsequently killing everybody else around him, and then also with Shin in the cases of this. I mean, of course, we have to go ahead and also like trust him a little bit. I mean, he did give us Thorn, and he did give us Last Word, like the originals. It looks like so. I don't know. Maybe that's good enough. I mean, I am a guardian. I'm just concerned with loot, right?
Yeah, yeah. Just step out of the game, right?
Yeah, really. Don't get me started on the fourth wall breaks. I am to this point now. I've already commented. I am going to start a compilation of all the fourth wall breaks that we have because they have just built up to that point that it is that important. Like, we need to talk about it.
We do need to talk about it. And we need to also talk about, is it actually fourth wall breaking or is it dimensional?
Right.
Because there's a nuance difference, and it's a nuance difference.
I mean, when you start introducing tarot cards and the occult, yes,
right,
just a little bit.
But that's what I mean. That's what I mean. I'm like, is it really? Oh, anyways, that's a whole different. I promise we're not going on different tangents.
Bring up the 9. We said we weren't going to bring up the 9. Let's not.
So a matter of trust. A matter of trust is the first entry, and a matter of trust is basically Shen being like, "Hey, so we need to talk," which is always an awkward start of a conversation with anyone.
You remember that thing I told you at the end of the malfeasance entries? You remember how I told you not to do this thing? Well, you did this thing, so now we got to talk about it.
Now we got to chat.
But you know what? Let me tell you something. It's not as terrible as you think it's going to be.
Oh my gosh. And so then we get to the next card of the pain of what's right. And this is, again, Shen is writing to the Guardian. This is where I made the comment. This is where the quote about perception is brought in. And this is where you start getting the sense of, hang on, wait, what's going on? Because the villain that he's talking about here, chat, yeah. Sorry, chat. Yeah, that's exactly. It's you. It's not you. It's me.
It's not you. It's me.
Oh my god!
I haven't heard that enough in my life.
But
anyway.
But this is so the pain of what's right is where we start getting the idea that, oh wait, hang on, maybe Shin is not so great. Maybe Shin is not as pure as we have been led to believe. And in retrospect, maybe Dredge and Yor is not as much of an abomination as we thought he was. Now, I'm still hesitant on that last one, but we'll get into it just in a second. And so, he goes on, he's like, but what if I were to weave another tale, give deeper meaning to the conflict that has drawn my and yours legacy to be painted in such a hateful light? And this is also where you see an acknowledgement of what our Guardian has done, because he opens this entry with the comment that, the quote, that you seek to wield the rival cannons is a noble quest, one that has brought low many who would claim to be your equal. The last word and Thorn are linked by the blood they've shed, but as you know, they are bound by more than violence. They represent warring ideologies. They are of a kind and yet wholly opposite, the cleansing fire and the festering disease, like the common view of myself and the shadows. Adversaries meant to destroy one another, enemies to our core. But what if I were to weave another tale, give a deeper meaning to the conflict that has drawn my and yours legacy to be painted in such a hateful light? Okay, so again, we have a confluence of events here, or a confluence of ideologies here. And the thing to remember is that it is now in-game confirmed that our character, the Guardian, holds both the last word and Thorn. Mm-hmm. These are two weapons that have never before truly been held by the same wielder. Because if you remember, even when Dredge and Yor defeated Jaren, he did, I'm pretty sure he touched the last word, but he did not wield it. He gave it back, and he said, give this to the boy. Mm-hmm. Give his master's sword to the boy. And this is where you saw that nod of giving Shin purpose through vengeance. Giving Shin, he was, and as we kind of come to find out, Dredge and Yor was offering something. Mm-hmm. Dredge and Yor was teaching. He was a teacher here. And this is where we start seeing that there is maybe a bigger picture in play here than just Dredgen being a terror and being a force of nature and being this monster that he was. He was going for something much larger. He was playing on a much larger field than maybe we're even aware of. We have another couple characters who are doing this. We have Toland, we have Mara, we have Osiris. You know, there's these big names. Toland, I kind of hesitated to put him in there, but I mean, to be fair, Toland is dabbling with the Ascendant Planes. Mm-hmm. I mean, I would be remiss not to mention that. He is still in the game. He's just in a different, I don't really know what he's doing. But I mean, he's still in there.
Belongs there.
Oh yeah, no,
absolutely belongs there.
He is bat crazy. Like
yeah.
He is. But he also is playing at a bigger thing because he is after the quiddity of death.
To be fair, he may not be whole.
Right, well, yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, and that, right, yeah. But
I was going to say he may not all be there, but he's just not whole.
Yeah. But I mean, even Toland in his broken state has been playing at a bigger game. Toland has been trying to understand the very nature of death. You know who else is trying to understand the very nature of death? The Nine. So, you know, in perspective, these are...
We said we weren't going to bring up the Nine.
But it needs to be said. Like, I mean, these are cosmic entities that are troubling with entropy. Well, that's what Toland's working on. Osiris is trying to decipher, you know, the convergence and you know how that is going to be played into this war of time and you know space and all this. You know, Osiris is I've started kind of seeing Osiris as the Doctor Who-esque type character.
Absolutely.
And then you know you have Shen, you have the Drifter, you have Dredgen. The Dredgens, the true Dredgens, not the shadows who are kind of, we'll get into that with Cull and all that. But these are characters that everyone else is playing on a cosmic level, and yet they're all forgetting the one thing that's very important, and that is the Guardian. The Guardian is the, I would argue, the fulcrum upon which all this balances. And everyone has forgotten that the Guardian actually can choose. And so when you see all these balancing acts going on, you know, Toland, Osiris, you know, you mentioned Ulantan, Mara, all these people are playing such big games, but Shen's going after the Guardian's soul. Drifter's going after the Guardian's soul. Like, they're going after the morality. They're going after the person upon which it all depends. And so, in a way, I'd almost argue that Shen and Drifter represent actually a bigger conflict. Because the presentation of the Guardian, which is our character, you know, our individual characters, whatever, they are meant to be the central centrifuge upon which all this stuff is based around. That's kind of what it's been presented to. And with that being said, go for it.
It also gives this, again, perspective piece, if you will, on like, well, we're dealing with darkness, so we think.
Mm-hmm.
So now the question is essentially like which part or which side is the darkness per se, in terms of like how we utilize it. Like the shadows of yore are regarded as these terrible monsters, so to speak. Until, of course, we end up getting this perspective piece and how it all kind of plays out. And then also with the Drifter and how the Drifter's use or dabblings in the dark kind of are as well. That's the general, at least, idea to me. Like, it is two sides of the same coin.
Mm-hmm.
We're not talking about light and dark here anymore. We're talking about, like, dark and dark in a little bit of ways. But even then, again, you start to realize that it's more like the balancing on the tip. It's that idea of symmetry that we're starting to kind of be more aware of.
Yeah, it's like something that Aldrin said.
Yeah, it's like, you know, lines and something being thin or
Mm-hmm.
something. I don't know. It's also a hand cannon.
Yeah. The other thing that makes me think of too is, Green had mentioned her thing about the drifter was about how he really lets you choose. He lets
Yep.
you choose, and he respects
Yep.
that choice. He might not agree with it, but he respects it. And that's something that we don't see a lot of in the other NPCs. Shin, actually, we do kind of see that. But Shin is just a little bit more trigger happy, I guess would be the best way to saying. Like Shin has his own vigilante problems that we probably should acquire if we acknowledge.
I don't know if I would even go that far. Like Shin still gives us the choice, I suppose. It's indirect, but he still gives us the choice. Like, do we hunt and ultimately find Thorn? Do we hunt for and ultimately put together malfeasance? Do we ultimately decide that we want to go ahead and like piece together these ideas and dabbles that have been within like the Vanguard's purview, especially as being more dark related and so on. Like he gives us the choice, especially with like paper or letters from a renegade. I think that there at least with the stuff that we don't get to read. Because of course at that point that's being sent to, at least we're largely thinking it's sent to Shax,
Mm-hmm.
and that he's working with him. So we may not ever get that general sense and whatnot, but we know of the legends. We know of what happens to those that dabble too far this way, and we know that like the man with the golden gun might be coming after us.
Right.
And they make it a point to showcase that with the ending with the corrupted strike with malfeasance, where you
well,
put
they
that
also
weapon together and,
they
and
also
show
do
off
that
Callum and everything.
with the salt mines entry, where Anor interrupts. Yep. She interrupts him from doing.
Yep.
So, the next entry after the pain of what's right is actually the first entry that is not Shin, but it's a page of the Book of Unmaking, and that's Evolution. Beard, I don't know. Did you want to talk about anything particular on this one?
Let me get there real fast. I think there was something.
I mean, it's a confirmation of the six new dredgens.
I gotta say the main ones, if you will.
Which Drifter's not part of, which I found that was kind of interesting.
Yeah, which also kind of actually I think digs back to what actually might come up a little bit later on. At least that's my thinking. But for instance, I'll just read down the list here. I'll just read verbatim what it is. Orsa is now in Ever Dredgen Vale, which would be Zyre Orsa. Zana Moss is Dredgen Scar. Jonah Pavic, Dredgen Meyer. Callum Soul, who we know from previous as well, is Dredgen Cull.
I love that.
What a real slight change in name.
Love that. I love that nod to what he... Well, because ultimately that's what he does.
That's what he does, which is... I think that's kind of telling of what happens with the names of the Dredgens as well.
Which also, I mean, one final note on that part though too is also then remember what Drifter's title was.
Yeah,
it was Dredgen Hope.
Also makes me think back to Confessions of Hope, which is a completely different tangent.
Oh no, no!
Yeah, I just said that. Raga Yasul, which I think is a completely new one, is Dredgen Totalis. And which is Tebin Grey, is Dredgen Bane. Now, the two that we knew of previously, at least from like D1, would be Dredgen's Bane and Dredgen's Veil of Tebin Grey and Zyre Orsa, respectively. And then, of course, we come to know Callum Soul as Dredgen Cull throughout the early events here of Forsaken. So yeah, we have several different pieces that kind of showcase what each of them is kind of about. And Black Flag's bringing up the thing actually that I wanted to talk about a little bit too. Zyre Orsa being Dredgen Vale, that actually makes a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm.
because there might be this veil of secrecy going on.
Mm-hmm.
Which again makes me kind of sit back and think about some of the other ones and what might actually go into them. Uh,
Well,
there,
we had a soft confirmation from Jill today that a lot of names are actually chosen for specific purposes.
right. I may have just like bookmarked the exact site
Oh,
that she
yeah,
mentioned
I
just to ensure it too.
might have done the same because I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
okay, that's good to know.
I was like, oh, this makes my job easy instead of me having to go and like hunt for these names and these different baby name sites that probably are mostly wrong because baby name sites are pretty well wrong. Uh, but that's really the big thing, except for of course the fact that we're still at the bottom. We are still dealing with the hand scrawled note accompanying Tevin Gray's personal translation of ancient Hive text. And I still am gonna just reiterate this point real fast. We have no confirmation where these pages come from,
Mm-hmm.
and until I start to really hear about like where the dig site was and whatnot, I can't. I I think that Tebin thinks that, but I couldn't tell you exactly where he got that information from.
Now, we do know that they got some of it from your ship.
Right. Yeah, there was some like early stuff, but again, we don't know,
But
like
again, with
this is
revelations that
perspective.
yeah,
This
well,
is-
in
this is where it
revelations
all
that
sits.
happen, it's like we also were told that the people who found it were Tebin and Zaire. Well, hey, surprise, surprise! One of those people is not necessarily who he says he is,
Yep.
and it's Zaire. For anybody who's not catching my like pretend subtlety there.
Yeah.
But like, so if this is one of the first things that I was kind of like, oh no, because if Shin, who is Zaire, is one of the ones who quote unquote miraculously remembers where Palamon or discovers where Palamon is, the unmarked site
Right.
that no one knows where,
Right.
that's because he grew up there. He knows where it is.
Right.
But then that begs the question: is that the first time he's gone back? Like
Right.
there's a lot of, in exactly what Beard's saying, there's a lot of potential for this character who has already kind of been, under the, as you said, the veil of secrecy. There's a lot of potential there of this person setting something up that might benefit him in the long run. And
Right.
again, it's like, it's hard because I don't want to be
Well-
the paranoid person, but it's really hard not to be.
It's, as we kind of said early on, it's your being the teacher.
Right.
And now at this point, it's Shin needing to be the teacher for the next generation. Or what he feels is the lesson that was trying to be taught to him. This could be the same general idea, like keeping this in mind as we kind of go along, as how you would interpret a lesson and then change it.
Right.
Like,
Well,
think
and
back
that,
to
I mean,
grade
again,
school, especially, like-
perception. Perception it's all about
Yeah,
the
really.
perception.
Well, and the perception, as I was just going to say too, like think back to grade school, because I go back to this common one, and I'm sure I've said it on the show several times already, and I honestly don't remember if I have or not. Go to grade school, listen to K through 12 history, and especially in United States history. We are taught how the founders could necessarily do no wrong. They were amazing people. They put together this great country, etc., etc. It may as well be propaganda, because when we get to college, or we tend to do our own looking even after the fact, if we decide to, we start to learn snippets and bits and pieces. And I think even something like Hamilton, the Broadway musical being
Right.
brought out in a way, kind of showcases that no, they weren't really these perfect individuals, and they are still human beings, and you are thinking too far and highly of them, and you need to step back to go ahead and contemplate that idea. Just these little bits and pieces that go into it. Not to, I'm sure somebody has already said that I've talked ill of the founding fathers, and I'm like, They're human beings. They were human beings that effectively founded a country and nations on like how they wanted and how their perception was and how they saw the world. There is no difference in how we found our founding fathers had put together this country versus another country altogether within this same exact planet or in another planet in the other far ends of the universe. You cannot change my mind on that idea because anything, and including this with how Shin put his thoughts together, by possibility, I'm not saying confirmed, but by possibility, and understanding this teaching that you're presented to him, it's by his understanding. It's by his perspective. And that's what he founds this on.
Yes. I mean, yeah. Yeah, that's exactly what it is. I mean,
I feel like I got there a little too quick, but
yeah, you know, it works.
Just I guess we can just move that to like later in the show or something. I don't know. I think that was all with
and paste.
Yeah, really. I think that was it with evolution. I'm just kind of skimming my notes here real quick, but. No,
I mean, it talks
the
only
other
about.
thing to reiterate is how Drifter, Dredge, and Hope is not listed here. But again, I'll get to talking on why I think that is a little bit later on here. Anyway,
yeah, and then also the comments that this is the entered the third lives. We have not wholly changed. Our evolution has begun. It's also kind of an acknowledgement from them. That he and Tebben kind of puts in there will be fear at the sight of us and in response to our deeds. There will be pain, both ours and others. This we know and this we accept with pride and eager, angry hearts. So it's kind of transitioning into that second point that I wanted to talk about is this new interpretation of what exactly are these shadows trying to do. And that kind of brings us into the faith in monsters piece. And this is really more than anything a recollection from Shin about his realization of what Yor was doing. And so I'm actually just going to read this one because I really appreciate the explanation, and there's a couple things that I want to kind of point out too after I get done with it. But so this is Faith in Monsters. And
this is like large clarification.
Oh my gosh,
I'll
huge.
just say that right now. It explains like several different pieces. It
explains tons of it.
Is it Thorn 4? And I think it's Last Word 3. Between those two entries, just try to if you can recollect some stuff behind them, just think about that in the back of your mind as we go along here with this entry, because that's how important this one is. Anyway, Blue, I'm keeping from
No, that's exactly that's one of the big things. So he says, I hunted Dredge and Yor for decades. First at Jaren Ward's side, then alone. I was obsessed, driven. I hated the man, still do. The difference between all the moments before I lit my fire and put rounds into the bastard and every moment since is what I learned in the instant I pulled Last Word from its leather. Yor never fired. Never even moved to draw. He just stood, straight and calm until my infernal lead tore through him. Then he dropped. It didn't register at first. Once he fell, the moment kind of hung there. I walked over, the world was quiet, and I squeezed off two more, to be sure. I remember a hint of joy well up inside me as I thought back on Jaren. I'd avenged him. I'd avenged Palamon and Durga and North Channel and all the rest. But my mind hung on Jaren, and my joy became tainted with an uneasy feeling. The moment of Jaren's death played on repeat in my mind. Rapid fire. Jaren's cannon, then yours, then silence. Long ago in a nowhere forest out west. Jaren never missed, yet he did. Yor then didn't, but Jaren was no easy target. Was Yor? He hadn't flinched when I pulled steel. No movement, no change in his tone or words. I gunned him down in mid-sentence, as if he didn't care. He knew I would, knew I'd draw, knew I'd fire. So why the talk? Why have words when he knew mine would be loud, mine would be death? Maybe you'll understand this without further explanation. Maybe you won't. But the answer is, and it set my course for every moment after, because he believed in me.
One thing I just want to call out real fast, how much I called it.
Oh my god! Well, and it was like I remember telling Green, I was like, "Well, I was kind of right because it always struck me that you're never like even moved. Like
there was no talk of movement. There was
he didn't
nothing.
like nothing. I'm like you're in a gunfight and there's not even a twitch. Like I mean, and I mean at first
he's pulling the guy.
Yeah.
He's pulling the guy in Good, the Bad, and the Ugly that's like standing outside when the guy's in the freaking tub and he's looking at Chen talking and all of a sudden he gets shot. It's like, if you're going to shoot, don't talk.
But the other thing I do want to, the other big thing, other than, so there's this confirmation here, and I think it's also, let me make sure, I think it's Shadow's Worth will be another one that I want to read in just a second. But this part sets up what is going to be even more overtly clarified in a Shadow's Worth. But the point that I want to make out here is that Shin refers to the golden gun as infernal lead.
Yep.
I want to call that out because infernal is a very distinct word choice here. And I find that very interesting. And especially as we later read through this book and we start learning a little bit more about the darkness that's within Shin. Because we have not ever really referred to someone summoning light as an infernal thing. Infernal is demonic. It's dark. It's dangerous. It's evil. It's not good. And so when we start doing that, and the name of this entry is Faith in Monsters. Like you start seeing where my brain is starting to kind of connect some of these dots. And so, and then Beard, I'm going to jump over suffering real quick and I'm going to go to Shadow's Worth and we'll come back to suffering if that's okay.
Sure.
Okay. So a Shadow's Worth is kind of a conclusion of this piece. And he says, Yor wasn't faster than Jaren. And Jaren didn't miss. Yor was just more than Jaren. Yor was other. It took fire to burn him down, and Jaren, for all his gifts, was lacking in fire. We all were, not saying I was the first. The lessons I learned, the ability I honed to ignite my rage and direct it through my cannon, those were hard lessons learned on a hard, hot planet, before Osiris's exile, before the gap. My pilgrimage was long and pained and driven by my hate. But that was the point. Skill was not enough. Confidence was no weapon. Not when faced with the terrors of the dark. Yor knew this. Yor counted on it. So when Jaren faced him down, Yor gave him the first shot, offered freely. But Jaren's lead wasn't enough, and when Yor replied, his sickness consumed Jared's light and left me once again an orphan. Once again weighed down by sorrow and anger. Yor sought to gift me Jaren's prize as a means to tempt me, and it did. When that gun finally met my hand again, it was the catalyst that drove me to find a way to avenge all I had loved. It was a selfish pursuit. But when Yor and I finally met on that flat, high ridge, I was ready, and as I would come to find, so was he. Ready to offer his final lesson, his final gift. A final push toward my true destiny. One that would put me at odds with heroes in order to ensure our worlds are filled with fewer monsters. It was a path I was sure to walk alone, until I found others, until I found trust, until I found hidden value in that which I had always feared. Shadows. So, yeah. I don't know how to, I'm like, yeah.
The only other piece to kind of, I guess, really, like, these are very straightforward entries, which is one thing I really kind of like about it. They're not trying to not judge and mire, but they're trying not to mire this in a lot of like junk. Like they're trying to show that Shin is trying to be very straightforward with us about what's going on here. But I like that they, in Faith in Monsters especially, they call out the places that
oh my gosh,
Yor had been as well.
And it confirms
And
those places too.
Yep. And in addition, how he was saying how his pilgrimage was long and pained and driven by my hate, uh, and how he was probably following Yor amongst all of those places, but then also going to Mercury and other areas and so on. In addition, though, we don't necessarily know that, like, these, like North Channel, for instance, or Durga. We know that Durga at least is a place here on the planet, but we don't know if there was like another Durga that was mentioned in other areas around our system, for instance. Um, the largest thing that makes me wonder is like how many planets that they go by, because it seems like Yor especially as well was on Mars at one point, so we don't know like where that could have led him, etc. Uh, but yeah, I just like how he knows exactly where my point here, where Yor was going, and he's able to at least catalog that back to the shadows later on. Like it seems like he's taking this up on his own. He's understanding the path that he needs to go, and he's understanding now the further that he contemplates and thinks about it, what he needs to do in order to defeat those monsters that show up. And he's content enough to do it himself. Until suddenly he finds a crew that he is comfortable with. Like, that's... I don't have much else, honestly, when it comes down to them. Like, they...
Yeah, real quick.
Oh,
no, go for it.
The only other thing that makes me kind of possibly wonder is he says that he had found others that... I'll kind of read it again here. Until I found hidden one that would put me at odds with heroes in order to ensure our worlds are filled with fewer monsters. It was a path I was sure to walk alone until I found others, until I found trust. It makes me wonder if they weren't already on that same path, like the Shadows of Yor had kind of formed on their own previously.
But Tebin had already kind of gotten a group together, and Shin found them. I could see that.
And they were like effectively building a group that looked at Yor from like a historical and combative perspective, and they were like trying to figure out what was going on with it, etc. Like digging into the legend, and then suddenly here is Orsazire, who has all this information that is able to, start to stem out to these shadows that start to put themselves together. I just wonder how far or how possibly true that is. This is, again, though, like looking at it from 20 different angles.
Right.
Like you could argue to say that, well, this is the way that they're telling the story and this is how they expect it to be. And you would probably be right in some cases, but I've already learned with this lore, you view it from 20 different angles and then some.
The other thing I was going to mention too, chat is asking this about the difference between Jaren and Chen.
I saw that, so I wanted to leave that be.
Yeah. So the chat was asking, is this a situation in, like, let's put it in game terms, that, Jaren wasn't high enough light level or, whatever. I would argue that no, it's not that actually at all. It's that Jaren didn't have a golden gun. He didn't have this rage, this emotion, this passion that Shin is talking about. Jaren had confidence. He had skill. And I mean, like, I get the feeling that we know Jaren was a guardian. He had a ghost, obviously, because that's where Shin gets his ghost, is Jaren's ghost adopts him. So, like, we know that Jaren was a guardian. We don't know what subclass, but I can feel pretty confident telling you it probably wasn't a golden gun. Now, that being said, that doesn't mean that he didn't have solar light. We have several... we now have several options as far as solar light goes with the introduction with I just went blank on the spectral, not the spectral blades. what is it? The
Oh, with Blade Barrage and
Blade
whatnot.
Barrage, yeah.
Absolutely.
So like, and we see that, you know, this would not be the first time that we see a unique portrayal of solar light. I mean, even Shin has these, Drifter has the ability to kind of cauterize wounds with solar light,
Right.
which is not a, it's not a known super that we all have, but Drifter's also explained as a light bearer, not a guardian. So, you know,
Which is a very different distinction.
yes, it's a very important distinction too. Like there's he's classless. He's
Yep.
multi-class, if you will. And so we have a soft confirmation in the Drifters lore entries as well that that's actually kind of the case. But the thing here is that it's not that Shin was, you know, it's not that Jaren was less than Shin. In fact, I would argue that, you know, if anything, Jaren was in some capacities more, but it was not enough to defeat Yor, because
it was not enough to defeat the Eternal Abyss.
Right. Which, oh my God, there's that name just makes me think of Nietzsche. But anyways, there's a whole connection there that I'm still working on, because it's like there's
what about a cult? I'm
sorry. No, I know. It's just I'm like, oh my God, it's like but anyways, because Shin is the one who hunts monsters, and anyways, moving on. Oh God, it's such a, but that's the thing is like Jaren didn't. Jaren was portrayed as, you know, the cool, collected, confident, very skilled hunter. He was never portrayed as an emotional person. Actually, that was one of the things that Shin specifically called out about Jaren, is that you never knew what he was like thinking. And his ghost was very similar. His ghost didn't talk at all to anybody except for Jaren. And so there was that. Let me see. So as far as like inside lore entries, no, we don't have evidence of Jaren ever using, you know, quote unquote light abilities. But I would say that that's not. I wouldn't say that means that he didn't have light abilities. Because I would argue the fact that he has a ghost kind of points that to not be the case. Is that long story short? That's what I'm trying to say, I guess.
I would kind of go with that. I think it's just like what is kind of explained here. Like Jaren was one thing, but Yor was other, and he kind of counts himself as other as well. I think it also important to point out that if Jaren never missed and he did hit Yor, and Yor no longer has a ghost, he was able to survive a shot from the last word at any possibly given distance, and still go ahead and gun down Jaren afterward.
Which I would also point out is not something that is entirely unheard of with the introduction of Nokris. Because remember, Nokris is a necromancer, which apparently is, you know, slightly taboo within the Hive. But I mean, so in the Hive are, you know, arguably that's Zior is whispering sweet nothings in Yor's ears, you know. So I mean, it would not surprise me to learn that there was a bit of heretical Hive teachings going on with Yor.
Yeah, but you don't want to hear my thoughts on that.
Well, yeah, no, I mean, there's also my thoughts of, you know, if Zior is the one that gives him the information on the Book of Unmaking, was Zior technically, you know, in good standing with the rest of the Hive? Because
I'm thinking something completely different.
Yeah, I don't want to think what you're thinking, so I'm not going there. I'm not going there. Because I don't like Rule 34 on that nature. Anyways, moving on.
It's not. No, it's not. Oh my goodness. We skipped suffering, by the way.
Yes, we did. Yes, I said we were going to go back. So let's go. We're speaking of suffering right now, so let's go back to suffering.
I lovingly call this one the future war called entry. If you read it over, like I can't read this, especially with like in part number 7. It says life is war within and without. Suffering is not pain; it is life. And for me, I cannot in any way, shape, or fashion read that without thinking about future war call. Just reading over the 11th understanding in general, it kind of like makes me think about that in general. Just
Mm-hmm.
the overall synopsis. Look to your suffering and know that it is a gift. For only those who strive truly suffer. All else are simply made to. So
I mean,
I
it kind of
can't.
ties into the philosophy too of like, how do you know that you're alive?
Yep.
You can feel pain.
What's that? Drifter's already dead. Okay.
Yeah. Well, right. Yeah. Yeah. Gosh, man.
Oh, I still love going back into that. But yeah, in a lot of cases, it just feels related to the FWC tenets that we kind of know of so far. Um, I don't know anything else in the entries themselves that
It's
kind of like pop at
the
you.
the other thing is the call out that not all heroes may walk freely in the light. So
Yeah.
this is a acknowledgement of kind of what I would hesitantly call the true goal of the shadows
Hmm.
is that these characters, these individuals are being now, instead of villains, they're not deifying what Yor did. In fact,
Yeah.
they're in some regards disgusted by what
Yep.
Yor was, but they also see the benefit in what Yor did, and they are recognizing it the same as Shin did, that there are times when you're hunting monsters that you have to become a monster. And they are willing to take that burden on and that hatred of the other on in order to, as Shin kind of said, in order to make sure that the world has fewer monsters in it.
Hmm.
Which actually I kind of don't really, I don't feel really a lot of like disgust towards that, because
No.
that's really similar to what you hear about with the original portrayal of the Night Stalker back
Yep.
in Taken King. That was exactly how the Night Stalker was presented. Was they were the hunter who was so good at what they did that it made other guardians nervous.
Yep.
Because in order to hunt the monsters, they were actually able to get into the head of the monsters as if almost they were monsters themselves.
Right.
One of my favorite pieces of armor is the Orpheus rig, which I've made that comment before. And if you read the entry there, Quantus Re is the figure that is being talked about, who is the narrator in that particular piece. And
Hmm.
Qantas is talking about how she feels more at home within the Vex catacombs underneath, I believe it's Nessus,
Yep.
because she's constantly having to live on that knife's edge of survival.
Right.
She makes the comment that going to the city for to report into the vanguard of what she's found is actually more unnerving to her than it is living in the Vex infested catacombs. And so and she's a Night Stalker. So, it's just like, that's kind of where I'm kind of seeing a connection kind of, and we know that the Night Stalker was an older class of Guardians, as far as the skill ability that was kind of called out within Taken King,
Hmm.
with the more elemental subclasses, which would be, I just refer to him as Emperor Palpatine, the Tickle Fingers, and then
Oh, Stormcaller and
and
Sunbreaker as well.
Sunbreaker.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Sunbreaker we also knew was an older one as well from the Mercenaries area.
Right.
So I mean,
Lost
it's again,
lost
it's
skills and talents, so to speak.
right,
Yeah.
and so again,
Or
it was
ones
just
that
kind of
are,
like,
especially in the case of the Night Stalker, feared.
yes, yeah, well, and I mean, and Storm, I would say Stormcallers were misunderstood more than anything because the
Well,
harmony within.
Stormcallers, especially on like a warlock standpoint too, they they run on that exact thing. Like I see Tebin Gray as a Stormcaller because he runs on the abilities of or the thoughts of balance.
Mm-hmm.
What we see in the Stormcaller entries is that
that's a very good
you're
point.
supposed to present yourself with like a side in terms of like where your emotions, quote unquote, should be.
Mm-hmm.
The Voidwalker calls for calm. The Sunbreaker calls for fury. Meanwhile, the Stormcaller calls for harmony. And that's actually the thing that I find most interesting with the way that Stormcallers especially are kind of presented versus even like other arc subclasses and so on. Like, it's still one reason that the Warlock fascinates me to this day, and why I absolutely still love playing the subclass or the class as a whole, is just the absolute power that is wielded by them, and how each and every time you throw a Nova Bomb or go into Storm Trance or pop out the sword in either protective mannerisms or as a offensive weapon, you are still like exercising that philosophy every single time you cast a super.
Mm-hmm.
It is so fundamental to the way that they're pretty well put together. It's the whole reason I bring that up. It's no different than what's going on here with like the Shadows of Yore as well, and how they're kind of putting themselves together. It's again why I think that Tebin is possibly his subclass is a Stormcaller, because he would have to wrestle with this idea of balance the whole time, and he would already be exposed to it already.
Right.
He may have been able to kind of like grasp that idea, and especially if he is an older warlock or an older user of the light, that's another call out back to it, because these are older abilities that we seem to have lost in that regard. It's not about calm for him. It's not about fury for him. He's looking for answers. And I think that's what's so important to kind of point out about the Shadows in general, but I think Tebin as a whole, which is the little bits that we've kind of gotten from him, could do a whole thing on Tebin with all the stuff we've gotten. Like,
right.
Oh
yeah.
he's
because
great.
Tebin is also, I mean, to be fair, Tebin is also the large reason that we have so much on the Shadows.
Right.
The other thing is you're talking about Tebin as an arc or tickle fingers. Yes, that one. I'm sorry. I default to referring to them as tickle fingers or Emperor Palpatine. So it's nothing. Anyways, but I also in the same. I also see Shin. To be honest, I see him more as a Night Stalker than a gunslinger. Because his, especially Dark Shin, I guess we would refer to him as, because of that whole thing about, kind of the same thing, like the fear, the hunting, and all this stuff. He has the rage of the golden gun. He has the methodical nature of that, but there's also the kind of what you were talking about with the Stormcaller and about the balance and, the true answers and everything like that. That seems to be more, it seems to be a lot of what is going on with Shin.
Right.
Where was I going with that? Yes, I saw Black Flag, saw where I was going with the whole thing in chat. So we got Shadow's Worth, we got Suffering, and then we got Anger.
Well,
or did you have, what else did you have?
The only other thing I wanted to bring up, because I think we've talked about like vigilantism pretty heavily so far, a little bit. If you need another relation at all to the Shadows of Yore, just think about Batman. I don't have any other place I can really go with that. Just think about Batman. Understands that he needs to become other in order to go against something like the mob, or go up against like the Joker or something otherwise. And that as well, his initial beliefs and then what he kind of turns to or how he changes over time is really no different in that respect. So I think if you're looking for like another fictional relation, I think Batman is an excellent depiction of that. Or Nightwing. I would argue that Nightwing actually more so because of his heavy turn to vigilantism, or also Red Hood, because Red Hood will actually go and kill.
Yeah, Red Hood. I think Red Hood is more accurate because of he will he will actually kill things gladly.
Yeah.
But you want to talk about anger? Because that's a kind of important thing in Shen's world.
Yeah, but I didn't know I signed up for anger management classes. I didn't even know I need them. This is news to me. Chat, do I need anger management? Is that
He
what
doesn't
y'all are
yell.
saying?
He doesn't yell much, right?
I don't go on rough tangents that get me involved in side politics and whatnot all the time. Never me. Anyway, the major things that I had seen here,
Pew pew. Choo
as
choo.
interesting as I think the basis with the entry about anger is, which I do like the summation here by all accounts and regards, and I think that some people might need to just stick it in their morning mirror whenever they see it, or in their morning coffee if they want to, start to read by osmosis. Ignorance is not passive. It is a living,
I love it. I love this one.
failure.
See, there was a reason I gave
passive.
this to you.
Yes. Ignorance is not passive. It is a living, aggressive failure that angers the hearts of all who seek to evolve. No, Doom. No. Let me tell you right now, that is not passion. That is pure unadulterated anger. That is anger at the thought, and I go through this every single day, when I hear somebody that has something so closed-minded, it is unbelievable. It is not passion. It is anger to the point that you are stunting my ability or any other's ability to continue to evolve, as this entry effectively talks about it. And it is not physical evolution, it is philosophical evolution. It is not passion, it is anger. This entry talks so right about the general position that I have as somebody that digs into history, that digs into education, and cares for those pieces, that it drives me absolutely belligerently insane. If you can't tell.
And the thing too is
ugh.
when they, and I think you're spot on with that, is the evolution that can be applied in, I mean, so many different cases. But the evolution
Clarity to
is,
Doom. I'm sorry to cut you off, Blue. I just got to get this.
Oh
out
yeah,
there,
oh
Doom.
yeah,
I'm
go
not
for it,
yelling at you, dude.
Right. Yeah. The evolution here that that I think Beard is talking about is not in game. It's the growth of your person. And I know that kind of sounds weird, but it's because it's through the expression and the mental theory crafting and mental examination of things that we grow. Like that's where that growth comes from. And so if you are ignorant, it says, as knowledge blossoms, know you know nothing. That's a very base tenet in philosophy. You know nothing. If you acknowledge that you know nothing, then you are opening yourself up to being able to learn. Because the instant that you say, no, I know that, that's when you have closed that door. And so This is where you see that anger and Beard, I appreciate that, because that is often where that is kind of going. And in regards to this entry, what they're doing is they're saying, let your anger guide you. Let that anger, that ignorance, that passive ignorance, or that living aggressive failure around you, let that guide you. Let that be the catalyst that pushes you forward. And
which we're starting to deal with some Sith ideas here.
We are right. No, we are. I mean, and to be fair to the Sith, not all their points were wrong. It's just they got some big things wrong. I mean, in the same vein, not all the Jedi were right. They were kind of narcissist. Anyways, I have very strong feelings on Jedi and their stupidity.
What about Mace Windu?
Sorry. Oh my God. Not even
Thorn 7.
Yeah, that one.
Sorry.
But the thing is here we see this particular note that's accompanying this is about Cull. This is
Yeah.
about dredging coal, and I kind of want. Sorry, chat. Your phone has Google on it. This is where we kind of learn. We had made a comment about this, about Cole's name kind of being appropriate, because Cole is the reason. His entire purpose, kind of as a character, is the culling of the false shadows. And how he did this was he basically went on a rant about the thing that the shadows are against, and he attracted all those followers who were there for all the wrong reasons to him, and then led them into their demise at the hands of the man with the golden gun. But the thing is that resulted in Cole's death as well. Cole sacrificed himself for that. And you even see Shin, who is the man with the golden gun who killed Cole, even refers to it as that noble sacrifice. Yeah. And so that's where I don't know, Beard, I think you said you had some other stuff that you wanted to talk about with regards to Cole.
Yeah, especially with this entry, because we start to see a couple pieces, which granted, I know the next one, I think with Emptiness, kind of covers all of it, but initial pieces here, we start to see how, and Blue, you kind of already touched on it a little bit, where there's this additional or subsect of the shadows that has kind of evolved. Mm-hmm. Where they're like fully dark, etc., or really dabbling a little bit too far than they probably need to be. And that's where we kind of get the implications that like this is not the purpose of the shadows, so Tebin believes, but it is something that is necessary for them to kind of handle as they go along, and is necessary for even for their own understanding and their own basis in knowledge. That like you cut the chaff, you get rid of the thing that effectively is not allowing you to grow anymore. If it cannot be conformed, or it cannot be allowed to like be open to it, or it has strayed too far down the path, then at that point it needs to be culled. It needs to be getting rid of.
It needs to allow for natural evolution, natural selection. I mean, not to use Darwin too heavily there, but that's basically the concept of Darwinism is the unnecessary will be carved away, and only the strong or the appropriate will be left. Mm-hmm. And so that's also where you get that sense. And I was pulling the weeds, right? Black Flag, exactly. Yeah. And it's again, and you see this within other pages within the Book of Unmaking. You see reference to not letting emotion, get in the way of these decisions that you have to make. And this is exactly what they're talking about. Shin also refers to this as the perfect trap, because he's purposely misleading people. And he even says that about malfeasance. He's like, malfeasance was done in a way to kind of entrap those who would pervert what they view as being the true nature.
Malfeasance was a gift,
but he said
sought further problems or
they
were the issue.
He used it as a kind of a litmus test to see if you were going to push something that shouldn't be pushed. And when you didn't push, or when you kind of pushed but not significantly, it was kind of, that's where this kind of leads into.
Yeah, which I think actually we're kind of dabbling with emptiness at this point, so we may as well just move over that way.
I feel very empty.
Yeah, I mean, that's about how I feel after a day of work. It's
all that ignorance.
The main thing with emptiness. Now, this is we had talked about it at the top of the show about perspective with Shin Malphur as a whole, but it's also this internal perspective that we also see with Tebin Gray, because Tebin is dealing with this assumption of who Zyre Orsa is, and we never get this sense that Tebin knows who Zyre is at all.
Yeah.
Shin has kept his identity a complete secret from the shadows because he is using them to the ends that he needs here with emptiness. Because we find or come to find out that the cull worked. Both dredge and cull and the culling worked to the largest degree here. If we're just trying to dig these names a little bit further, I just figured you'd like to know that. The base idea, though, in this respect, is that they weeded out those that effectively strayed too far, and they did this by ensuring that Cull could basically pull them out of the woodwork entirely to say, hey, I got this stuff that we can do that'll really push us over into the darkness. You wanna go play with this? You wanna go mess with it? And everybody's just like, was that what we're here for? So all of a sudden they start to pull up the weeds. They start to really get rid of all of that. I'll read the actual Tebin portion, though, because I think it is fairly important to kind of highlight exactly what ended up with all of this as we've been kind of summating it. The ruse worked. Cull's radical speech gathered the weaker among our number, a splinter group of radical shadows hell-bent on worshipping darkness and bending to its will. He preached a doctrine of hate empowered by total corruption, and the lesser-minded who flocked to our purpose were drawn in like flies to filth. More important, the renegade took the bait, turned many to ash, turned Cull to ash, a failing on two fronts. First, Cull's sacrifice bought us time and distance. Second, it rallied many of our newest recruits against the renegade. Sides are being chosen, and Vale's recording of Cull's death will draw those most eager to tempt darkness. All is proceeding as we envision. Is it all proceeding as Tebin envisions?
That's what I was about to say.
Simply proceeding as Zyre envisions. Because when all is said and done, again, Tebin has no idea that the renegade is Zyre Orsa. Like, he has no idea, effectively, that this other person, this other entity, this Zyre Orsa, who has a recording of Cull's death, is the same renegade that also killed Dredge and Cull in seemingly the Dreaming City, as we have seemingly seen in the Corrupted Strike, and who has, as I kind of like to say, who has Hiroshimaed him to the rocks.
Yeah.
Also makes me wonder if they, if through that strike there aren't more of those like shadow figures up on the walls and whatnot. I never saw any, but I wasn't looking. It almost makes me wish I could get back into that version of the Corrupted Strike so I can kind of see it.
I'll let you know when I get to it.
Okay, that works. But yeah, that's the major thing that I think is kind of like, or should be realized here. Tebin and the other shadows are not understanding that Zyre is Shin Malphur or the man with the golden gun. Which, of course, that leads into Revelations and Invitations, which we've been talking about basically the entire podcast. But it's important to note it because it then has that layer of perspective that makes you wonder, well, where or how far is Shin willing to go to allow for this to happen? And funny enough, ends on the 13th understanding of the 7th book of Sorrow. To rend one's enemies is to see them not as equals, but objects, hollow of spirit and meaning. And when all is said and done, that's pretty much what Shin is doing, even with the trusted shadows of yore. If he can use them to his advantage to make a culling or make something else that appears for the shadows as they are, he'll do it. And though he is remorseful of it in some cases, he understands that it's necessary. And seemingly so do the other shadows. But if the only one that's left standing at the end is Zyre, oh well.
Well, and I think that's also, Shaggy in chat's making the point too, is like, could Tebin also be playing the part?
Right.
And I mean, because I'll be honest, I kind of read it both ways. I see it both ways. Because there's nowhere that, I don't know, like it completely seems to depend on how you read the tone of the text, which I understand is extremely difficult with text.
Yeah.
Because like there also could be the argument that Tebin does know who Zyre is, and that he's writing these notes for the other shadows who may not be in that trusted inner circle.
Considering that like Zyre and Tebin are the founding members. So
right, like they kind of seem like intertwined with each other. Because I'll be honest, when I first read that, I read that as Tebin knew, and he was furthering the propaganda against the false, or the renegade, and all this. Because if you read it as the shadows being a I like to refer to them as a honeypot, basically, for these Karen flies that they're going after. That actually does further Shin's goal even more if he has Tebin on his side, who's also whispering false propaganda against the renegade and against all this stuff. I can see the argument there, and there's nothing really that strongly points either way. Because you can still, like I said, when I first read it, I actually read this as Tebin and Zyre are like in lockstep.
I think there's something later that makes me think otherwise on that angle, but
okay.
I feel like we'll get to that with Revelations Invitations, but I see where you're coming from, because I think I had the initial reaction as well. I forget what it was that made me think otherwise.
It might be something
to this. But anyway.
Yeah, I mean,
and it could be like you and I have run into this a couple of times, because I remember on like a very early episode when I was on, we got talking about Thorn and the Thorn entries, and how I had I had kind of read over the entry in Thorn 4 where it was Jaren's ghost that was talking to Yor.
Oh, yeah.
And I think there was something else that was going on there initially, and I was like, I can't read this as anything else. But yeah.
And that's like our conversation with Purple, who with
exactly
what was it, the one word that she was like, yeah, but you can read it this way. And I'm like, oh, damn it. Like,
well, and that came to it's literally like, it's a war mind, or is it a war mind?
Or a war mind, or I'm like, no. Like, Purple, why?
Like how is the emphasis derived on that single letter?
And that's right, and that's where I'm like, I kind of sometimes wish, as much as I don't wish, also that these were audio, because with audio, regardless of if you agree with the emphasis, you get that emphasis, it's right there, whereas with text, it's kind of like, is it though? Like, that's the whole thing.
And I think that's where, so many, to go back to like Lost Thorn again, to kind of like harp on it. That's why everyone's perspective in some rights is absolutely correct, but absolutely wrong. Until we get direct and full evidence in these things, I could come out with a 30-minute theory like I just did. I will completely admit that I am totally wrong. If there is one thing that will go ahead and counteract the ideas that I have presented so far, I'll put my hands up and be like, cool, let's go ahead and like rewrite this theory. Let's get back into it.
But that's the fun of theory crafting.
That's how I approach that. Exactly. Meanwhile, you get the counterpoint of it, where everybody's like, well, this is how it is, and that's the only way that you can interpret it. Absolutely wrong. and it goes back to anger all over again.
Beard doesn't need anger management. He needs to
No.
educate people.
No, I say this on several levels. I am not a hateful person, but I am hateful of ignorance.
Yeah. Let's talk about Revelations.
Sure. Do you mean the last book in the Bible? Because I feel like that's.
Oh, God,
I'm sorry.
I didn't
Is
even
that not
connect
where
that.
we're going with
That
this?
was hilarious. I did not even think about that. That's awesome. I love it.
You're welcome.
That is so appropriate. But
it's like we were just I love that they cap it off with revelations and invitations.
Right.
But the fact that they have revelations in here, and the fact that most of this book, and of course Book of Unmaking and everything, is basically the Shadows of Yours Bible.
Yeah.
That's cap it off with that is hilarious.
That's a very good point. Oh my gosh. That cracks me up. So God, man, I don't even know how to recover from this whole thing.
So I'll read the top portion here, which I think is extraordinarily important, which we've already completely slapped in the face already here for you. A revelation. So now, the truth. You've earned it. My name is Shin Malfur. My name is Sire Orsa. My name is Dredgen Vale. And all who fall to darkness will answer to my steel. I think this is kind of where my initial... Yeah, I'm gonna read this, and I think it can expect what we were talking about a bit ago. The shadows, the Drifter's Gambit, the seeding of fear that the infamous man with the golden gun was on the hunt, blinded by allegiance to the light and gunning for all who would tempt the darkness. A necessary deception, offering two paths in order to draw out those eager for power beyond their means. Malfeasance was a gift, a sample to gauge the true hearts of those who reveled in the Drifter's games. Those sated by its wicked power were kin enough to know their limits. Those hungry for more, a danger worth tracking. In some cases, a danger in need of confrontation. But the game has only just begun, and I risk much like this here, me offering you the olive branch of truth and trust. Yes, I have led you to believe I was your friend, and the shadows my enemy and yours. If all I have just revealed calls that into question, know that it shouldn't. The shadows are a danger. We are guided by the evolved and controlled methods of Dredgen Yor, except instead of death and destruction, I am offering the mysteries and powers of the darkness as bait for those who would otherwise go freely into the abyss. I have built the perfect trap with which to cull the weak-willed, and it is working. The thing that made me kind of think in here that Tebben didn't know about Zaire being Shin comes back to how of course I just got done reading over it, now I lose it here. Yes, I have led you to believe I was your friend in the shadows, my enemy and yours. If all I have just revealed calls into question, no, it shouldn't. The shadows are a danger. He wants to keep them at arm's length, but still effectively kind of keep them close. I think that's like where, at least, again, in my interpretation, in my perspective on how I read it, like,
it was last week,
that's
I think, when I was talking to, I think it might have been, I think it was Dino in chat. And he made a similar comment, and I'm like, what? Because I'll be honest, I'm on the opposite side. I was like, I always read it as Tebben was aware of what was going on, and he was just, he was just his front man, the empty, or not the empty, but like the gotcha, guy. And because that's, oh my gosh, now I have the picture of Tebben doing
it's absolutely a gotcha moment. Like, this whole thing is a gotcha moment.
No, it is. But I guess in light of that comment, we are brought to an invitation. And I'll read this one real quick. And it's an invitation. Sure. It says, "The Vanguard and I are not enemies. We simply have different methods. But to their credit, they have allowed my actions, as they have a wide array of concerns to fill their attention. Not that they haven't helped in small ways, snippets of conversation to plant the shadows as a threat, feigned ignorance of the Drifter's games and its consequences. Zavala prefers more straightforward tactics, but even he agrees that as Guardian numbers grow, it is vital to test the true mettle of those trusted with the safeguarding of our fragile survival. But others, the Guardians who have joined me, Tebin, Braga, Jonah, and Zana, they are all believers in our cause. And Callum, the truest hero who made the purest sacrifice. His death was noble and by my hand, but not a hateful thing. His part was, and remains, key to sealing the temptation of any who would give themselves to sorrow's road. All who take up arms in his names will be enemies of all he held dear, and they will be punished. You have my word. I'm burdening you with the full reality of the gambit at play because I believe in you. My earlier words, my gifting of the last word, that was earned and all true. You are the future of this war. You, and a few like you, are the warriors who can walk the line between light and dark. And so I ask you, are you up to the task? Or have I risked all that I have struggled to build on a hero who is not yet ready to become a legend?" Again, so like I'm reading that even now, and I'm still reading that as I think it was Legato made a comment in chat that actually was kind of where I was going with. He said, or they say, it feels as though the upper echelon of the shadows, the named Drifter, well, I don't think Drifter knows, but the named at least, and Malphur are all working together to cull the weak and the ones that can't handle the darkness. Now I don't think Drifter was in that upper echelon, but I totally get Definitely that not. Sense. I get the sense that there is a, that we've made a couple snide comments about the shadows being a cult, but I think that there is a structure that is similar to a cult in play here. And right. any cult worth its salt, if I may be so crass, is going to have an inner circle. Mm-hmm. And that inner circle is usually the group of people who while they might not know 100% of what the Grand Master or the Grand Magus, whatever you want to call them, is going for, they have like 95%, 90% of the information. Like they know right. They know quite a bit. And that's kind of how I was reading the shadows for me. And but as soon as I say that, what you were saying also, I can read it as him being like, oh no, I've kept the cards so close to my, so close to the vest that no one knows except right. for, then that presents the picture of like old man Logan. Like, I'm getting too old for this. I need to get, what was it?
That gets into this perspective though. Like he's pointing out that he's handed over the two cannons to us at this point. Like he wants to make it known that like he's passing on the duty now I guess to another generation in a way.
Because he did kind of make that comment in what was that, the Letters of Renegade at the end of it.
Yep.
Okay. I mean, I can. Yeah. I'm still kind of hesitant to give up my interpretation, but I definitely see both sides.
And I think you can read it. Yeah, I think you can read it either way, honestly. Until like this is going to be the thing about like Bungie writing as a whole. Like let's go into Bungie 101 when it comes down to any of the writers that they have.
Unless it's stated clearly.
Yeah, like if I don't see a body, it ain't dead. Marasov, hello.
Anna Bray.
Anna Bray. The biggest thing here, though, would come down like how you and I are interpreting this piece differently. Before I go into my other portions here that I wanted to talk about too, either way is right, because either way gives this perception of how it could be. Like, is Shin keeping everything close to the vest, or does he effectively tell the upper echelon of the shadows, or the ones that founded it with him, that, hey, I'm Shin Malphur, like I'm the man with the golden gun, and I'm totally willing to go ahead and take out the guys that go out of line here for you? Or is he literally only telling us as the Guardian, who is that much different from the rest of the guardianship that has been resurrected and is carrying out missions within the solar system?
Right.
That's where you get to this like really flaky line, like he's willing to trust us that much,
Right. Yeah.
but
No. And yeah.
he's not willing to trust the other four that are left from the founding body of the Shadows.
And I guess that's where,
in that regard, could still say how much he still distrusts the Shadows. Going back to the idea of the Shadows are a danger.
Yeah, and I guess my thought there too was that upper echelon, if you will, that inner circle in the Shadows, they have the same goal as Shin.
Yep.
Like that's where my thought process of them knowing this truth is, because ultimately they have the same end goal. Like, I mean, you could argue that's also the same for him in the Vanguard, right? They have the same end goal too. So yeah, it's one of those things that I think until we get, and I hope we do. I hope that I get the feeling that the Shadows are going to play a very large role. Especially with the doubling down of the Drifter. I get the feeling.
Yeah. I have a feeling if it's not Season of Opulence, because I feel like they have dug what they can with the Shadows at this point with Season of the Drifter. Mm-hmm. I have a feeling they will make a rather large return in either the next annual pass iteration that comes out for Destiny 2, or it'll end up being in Destiny 3, and we actually see Zyra Orsa pop out and like, hey, I'm here to fight the darkness with y'all, because it's that time of the day. I don't know which way it's going to end up going, but yeah, oh god, you just did it.
Get Matthew Mercer back in here.
I could see either one of those effectively being the case. I feel like they're moving more towards Destiny 3 with it, though, at this point. Like, I really feel like they want to keep looking into these structures of, like, what goes into being a Guardian. And I have this feeling if what the rumor is true right now at the rumor mill, because, of course, don't take anything I'm saying with release schedules and whatnot, like, in any way seriously, because I don't keep up with them at all. If we have another annual pass release, I have this feeling that we'll see like a reinstitution of the factions, because the factions also are a large portion of like what the Guardianship used to be. And if they bring them back, talk about them a little bit more, especially when you bring up A113 or Cocytus in recent entries, like you can't talk about those without bringing up Dead Orbit. Like, they go hand in hand in that regard. Like, it sucks that we don't have more written information back to them. Anyway, to my point here, if they decide to do anything else with them, I think that it'll end up being in Destiny 3. I don't think it'll be too much more with D2 in its current iteration. But I can wholly see that they're going to continue to dig in with them. Like, this story has proven to be so popular from the inception of Destiny to its very end days of D1's newer content and whatnot with its release, all the way through there, basically. And now, as soon as you end up mentioning anything about it, I remember when in Vanilla D2, somebody said, "Oh, there's a ship called Rose and Bone that talks about Shin Malfur and Dredge and Yor." Everybody lost their mind over that. And it was just a recounting of like a snippet of what actually happens with the story. And all I'm sitting there thinking is, guys, go read the actual freaking lore if you want.
Yeah, because that was all there. Yeah.
Well, and the only thing that I feel like that's a demonstration of is how simplistic and how cut down that legend had become that started to circulate. That was my ideas on like what Rose and Bone was all about. And now we get more information that builds off of that initial legend and builds off of that initial story. That's what I just absolutely love about like the little bits and pieces to say like these are the things we're focusing on going forward in our issue 1, so to speak, and now how we are building upon the world that we have. I mean, another point in case of it, who thought that the stupid red box was ever going to be referenced again?
Oh my god, I'm so happy that they brought it back. I was like, that has been, that was one of the biggest things. Was like, what are we? I mean, there's some, there's, yeah. Are we ever gonna get explained what it is? And it was.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Needless to say, I think we're good for shout outs at this point.
Yeah, I think so.
Because I mean,
Anyway,
well, and
yeah.
that being said, was my third thing that I really did want to ask too was, you know, what you thought about as far as like what this means for the future of our Guardian. And I think what you just were talking about is a good summarization of that exact thought.
Yeah.
So
what Bungie has in store for us, of course, is still going to come down to like what they decide on. I think at this point, with what we are being shown, however, and like the amount of freedom that they are giving the writers as well to kind of work with, Jonathan Toe, Jill Shar, Malin Z, several others are absolute unsung heroes, I think, at this point, with the story and the destinations that we've started to see with Destiny as a whole.
mm-hmm.
And I think with the last, with Forsaken and how they kind of opened the gates with that, with Seth Dickinson as well, and so on,
Mm-hmm.
With Black Armory and how they told a different side of the story, and how they started to kind of dig into the black market a little bit further. And now at this, with like digging into, is it the darkness or is it a gray line that you have? Because I think just to stress the point and digging into, you know, how the Guardian could perceive or what could be done later on with the Guardian, so to speak. The shadows of yore walk in the shadow of yore, but they never go right up to him.
Yep.
They never effectively step that far into that bracket. They never basically go over that thin gray line of what it means to be a guardian and what it means to walk in the shadow of darkness. And that's what I think is so key to kind of remember. They're not absolutely saying go out and be a Dredge and Yor as we initially thought they were.
Mm-hmm.
It's something further, and that's why they have the name of Shadows of Yore. So, just as similar as basically our Guardian has been with like walking this thin line in killing Uldren in the end of the Forsaken campaign, and doing things for these individuals that we probably otherwise wouldn't bother with. It's no longer just about the Vanguard. It's now about several different factions and pieces that you would not have seen if you only focused on the city. And by pulling us down from the tower and putting us into other areas that now matter, or getting us closer to the ground, further and further into the city.
You mean making us human?
Every time we do that, we recover pieces of our humanity. We recover pieces of like what it is that we're guarding against. We recover pieces on like how we effectively are conducting ourselves and our general operations day to day. Like, that's so important. And you know, going back to my rant on anger a little bit, how you conduct yourself day to day is not just read about in fiction, is not just read about in the news or philosophy or poli-sci or whatever else you want to bother with. It comes down to taking in every single event that you end up seeing and allowing that to be your general interpretation of the world, but always being open to further interpretations of what can come. Either it's somewhat being more understanding of maybe why somebody is possibly offended by something, maybe if you don't get it, or still don't agree with it, but you can still kind of understand it in a way.
Indeed. And yeah, and I mean, you know, especially with regards to dealing with I mean, a huge shout out to John and Guy, who are the, you know, kind of the leads on that part too. I mean, the whole writing piece, I think throughout the life of Destiny, I would argue, has been really strong. It's just getting it accessible that has been, I would argue, the struggle more so than the strength. Because, you know, I would argue, I'm one of the arguments that I think we're seeing the same strength of writing. I just think that it's more easily visible to people. To be honest,
I'd still argue that there's some missing pieces with like vanilla.
Oh yeah, I mean, well, and
but
I think
that felt like it was more set pieces that
yeah,
were starting to work.
Yeah, I think there's also obviously a larger issue with that particular situation, both on a political and business level too. But I mean, but that being said, I mean, it's a huge shout out to those guys and girls and ladies, and I don't even know what I'm supposed to say there. The people on the writing team are amazing, is what I'm getting at. And so that's really, I mean, a huge shout out to them for giving us something that for every week for the past 3 to 4 years we've had the chance to come and chat about. You know, and that's the thing is, like, without them, these communities that we love to be part of really honestly wouldn't exist. So, I mean, I don't think the gratitude can be overstated there. My only other shout out really is to Bife. Congratulations on nearly a decade. That's some dedication. I think it's 8 years was
8 years.
8 years.
Yep, that is longer than any job that I've decided to stay at. That is longer than I know many people that have held like any position, period, anymore at this point. Unless you're like government worker, I think, and a lot of rights. Otherwise, you're really not keeping your job for that long in like corporate situations.
Right.
If you're sole proprietor and you've kept with it even for that long, good on you. You know, and that's where Bife basically is at this point. The fact that he's been at this for 8 years and it has been his passion and he continues to follow that passion is amazing. It's extraordinarily inspirational as somebody that's kind of trying to do the same thing on like a personal level too. And he shows he can do it. He shows he can get it done. So I give him all the props in the world. I didn't mean to cut you off, Jay.
No. That's, I mean, that's, like, I know you and I both had very similar comments to him on Twitter. This, I think that was that this morning, I believe. Yeah. My days are blending together.
Again, time. What is it?
I'm like, I don't know what day it is anymore. So yeah, but yeah, no, huge shout out to him. And I mean, it's just, it's not easy. I mean, it's no. I know we've said that a lot. I know if you've ever tried to create anything, you know that it's not an easy gig. And YouTube on top of that is its own nightmare fuel to begin with. So
what about anger?
Yeah. So yeah, but yeah, huge shout out. Thank you guys so much for sticking with us. Green will be back next week. And like I said, we will be doing the top 3 next week. And yeah, so you guys, if you want, you can stick around. We'll be doing a little bit of an after show, I'm sure. And see you next week.
Bye.
All right.
Actually, didn't go over too far, did we?
No. Yeah, sorry for cutting you off there.
Oh, you're good.
That's why I looked up and I was like, oh, okay, we're over the 2-hour mark. We're just gonna, hey, Beard, let's do shout outs.
Yeah, really. Well, and I kind of felt
I think
how often have we kind of said, though, like how, one, all of these topics seem to weed into each other, but two, just all the clarification pieces that we're getting alone can
oh my gosh, yeah.
basically like just be 3 or 4 hour talking points in and of themselves.
Well, because like
which again I think speaks to the weight and the volume that we've been given. Granted, 5 handwritten books alone will say that that's the case, but
right. Well, and I think the
yeah.
other thing too is like, because the thing is like, you know, like you and I, you know, and well, oh, that sounds egotistical. I didn't mean it that way. The people who have been like really heavily invested in the written story, like the written grimoire from day one, like when we get these additional clarification pieces, there is a lot of emotion tied into it. You know, whether or not you agree with the pieces, excuse me, is you know, it's beside the point. That's actually not my point. The point that I'm having is that there is a lot of passion involved in this. And so, you know, Night Shaggy, what I see too is part of that is, you know, we get these clarification pieces like, you know, this book. Well, you have to explain 3 years of history as to why this is such an important thing. And that's not an easy feat. You know, that's the other thing that I think also you gotta, I think that's a difficult line to walk.
Yeah. You know what? I just remembered actually the other piece that makes me wonder on if the shadows even like knew about Chin.
Mm-hmm.
Last word 5. Will you fight them?
Will you?
The
Yeah.
shadows, those who have taken up arms in the name of Yor. The hope is they are more careful than their inspiration. Do you believe that will make a difference? No. Then what will you do? The Vanguard has an eye on... The Vanguard have their eyes on many things. I'm aware. Then what will you do? What needs to be done? But if he didn't even tell his ghost about Zyre...
Well, but I mean, well, I think I would assume the ghost. Yeah. Okay. So emphasis on the words that I just used there, but I mean, you know, I also could argue that, you know, technically you could read that. I see where you're coming from, but I could technically argue that he says I will do what needs to be done. Mm-hmm. You know, like it. Yeah. I mean, it does make a strong case towards him not telling them, but I could also see the twist being, you know, he's arguing that I don't know.
Well, and the only other thing that I had thought of as well is the possibility that this is like a staged recording, that he wants this to be like presented to him in that regard, and like pushed him off the path from the Vanguard.
Well, because he did make the comment that the Vanguard had left snippets of conversation around painting the shadows as villains.
Right.
Yeah, so it could be something where he's gaming the system.
Well, and what does he do with the Callum death scene? Like 3 different ways he basically posts this out. He tells it to Shax in a different light. Drifter perceives it in a different way, and we perceive it in a different way, all at the same time. And by that manufactured evidence on like how it could be presented or what had happened, like when we arrived in the Corrupted Strike, does that happen like immediately? Like at that position? Or does it happen like hundreds of years before?
Right. And I guess my other question there too is, when we're in the Corrupted Strike, because I haven't done that particular piece, I know that there's pieces of that are taking place in the Ascendant Plane.
It pretty much all takes place in the Ascendant Plane, which makes me curious.
Well,
like,
because you know where where I'm
how-
going with that is because that's
it's the thing that I'm probably on too, and like why it still doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Yes,
it's like, is that really what happened? Like, is that really the place that it happened, or is it a projection? Because in
Yeah.
the ascendant plane, you're playing with psychomutable reality. So you're because that's where your explanation of like throne worlds and stuff like that can be portrayed
Right.
as being things that are modeled off of the will. So if you're in the ascendant plane and you stumble across, because that's my one point that I've always kind of used as the challenge when people are like, well, why is it taking place in the Dreaming City? I'm like, how do you know it took place there?
Right.
Like because in all honesty, you're, especially in that particular piece of the ascendant or your exposure, you are chasing the malfeasance hand cannon. Your brain is already just following the idea of where your thoughts go, you are thinking about X. Well, if you are in a place that molds itself to the psyche of whatever is perceiving it, and that mind is obsessing over this particular event, then of course you could argue that that psychomutable world is going to be portraying that event, which also points to the possibility of why it's a slightly different interpretation, because it's imperfect knowledge and it's being interpreted as being relayed to us, but yada yada yada. There's like 4 degrees of misinterpretation that are possible there. Like I don't know.
The only piece that makes me think and question a few ideas, and Black Flag, I'll get to yours here in a second. In the rest of the Dreaming City locales that we're kind of in, especially going like between the ascendant plane and then back into real world, so to speak, it's like immediate 1-to-1. Like all of a sudden we're in a section of a building for the
Right.
Awoken. We pop out and we're back into that same exact area. So that's the one thing that I know many have kind of argued on.
Right.
It's just the...
However...
Is it a basis of the mind thinking that?
Or
is it legitimately like, this is what it is?
See, I would argue that it's the former. I just think that when you're talking about the general format, and this is all, of course, interpretation, so preface that conversation with it, or preface this conversation with that statement. I've always interpreted it as the former because with the whole thing with the Taken King and Oryx and the Argonaut Carve, it's all about debates and a conflict of mind versus mind. It's you proving your existence through the strength of will in a world that is being willed to destroy you. You have to prove that you have the will to survive in a world that is dominated by the will of its creator. And that's why every time we destroy a ascendant being's throne world, it starts falling apart. The prime example in Destiny 2 is the Mindbender. You kill the Mindbender and his hodgepodge, throne world starts immediately just falling apart. And if you look at, back in D1, Crota's realm did the same thing. Oryx's realm did the same thing. Like all these ascendant ascendant realms that we were invading, we didn't know the quiddity of the geometry of those spaces, but we knew enough to make the case that we had the right to exist. And so that being said, when we talk about the Dreaming City and its ascendant realm within the Dreaming City, the thing that I would counteract is that you have the 2 monumental wills of Morosov, the entire Awoken people, and Riven, creating those psychomutable realms. So it's
especially with Riven, who
right.
is
Yeah.
like
Well, I mean, it
extraordinarily
was
in
extraordinarily in
control.
control. But I mean, even if they weren't, Riven was. It's also you have the entire people of the Awoken, of the
Yeah.
Reefborn Awoken, who are convinced that this is the way that this is happening. It's the whole thing of like the shared perception of reality. It's when you have an entire culture or an entire society that is convinced that X is going to be true, one person saying, "Well, what about Y?" is, I mean, it might cause a blip, but it's not going to cause that reality to unfold. Now, that being said, I haven't run the Malfeasant quest yet, so I'm not sure on where that all fits within the creation of that particular piece of the Ascendant realm. But that's
Well,
where I'm kind of like, is it because we're obsessed with that facet of reality
yeah.
right then that it's creating that shadow play, if you
Well, and
will.
this is where Black Flag's point kind of comes
The
in,
ghost.
because Callum's ghost is broken and on the ground,
Okay,
and you
and
have this exact portrait of like a body that is strewn up on a wall. Like I said, Hiroshima up on the thing.
right. And I guess,
Um,
I guess
well,
my
I have a line on that on why it makes sense.
no.
Like
I'm not saying that it
there's
doesn't make sense. I'm just saying that is still that's still possible
well, it
in.
is, but in a different line. So
Oh, okay.
hear me out on this angle. The whole problem that we run into with Drifter's information is that Drifter was supposedly out of the city, or out of the system for a very long time. He
Right.
had been out of touch with Callum for a very long time. He had no idea what was going on with him. And then suddenly, Renegade or Sire or somebody else gives him information on where Callum is. Now, all of a sudden, Drifter's like, well, I've been talking with Callum off and on here. And then suddenly he finds out, oh, Callum's dead. I don't understand this. How is Callum dead? I was just talking to
But
him.
didn't he sell Callum out?
Yeah. Which is the other kind of side note on most of it, which
Because
I still don't quite
I don't
like.
yeah, that's where I get lost, is because
Well,
I keep hearing
did
people
he
being
or
like,
didn't he?
well,
Like
he
that's
told Shin where he was, like.
yeah. But did Shin already know he was gone? Like that's where I'm
Oh,
wondering.
you
Like,
mean like the
where
timing
did
of.
he? We're talking about Zaire giving information that is again planted.
Right.
How far does that go?
Well, because the other thing too is like the thing that makes me think that, I think, is that Letters of Renegade, that he makes the comment that Drifter gave him the information on Callum,
Yeah.
because then he makes the and of course, yeah, you're right, because the entire Letters of Renegade are planted evidence, but he makes the comment that that's how he then hunted him down.
Well, and we come to find out that like I think that Drifter was part of Callum's
I think Drifter was part of the
corrupted
cult
branch.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
totally agree with you on that statement.
Yeah.
Though
Which I
don't
think that's when he figured he needed to get the hell out of Dodge, and he
yeah.
ran real fast.
Well, and
Um,
I get the feeling that the people that he ran with might have been also part of the corrupted thing that survived the cull.
Yeah. And I think that there are probably a couple of him that ran with the Ice Planet then too.
Right, that's what I mean.
'Cause I
But
don't
but
think it
then
was like
but then the problem there is the convoluted time process. Because if
Right.
they ran from the system because of the cull, like it's you know what I'm saying? Like when did the conversation with Shin happen?
Well, this is again why I think that Drifter thought that he was communicating with Callum. Callum gave a reason for Drifter to sell him out. And the whole time Callum's been dead because Shin or Zaire knew where he was the whole time. Like, that's the ultimate stupid point of all of this. The amount of layered planted evidence is getting bigger and bigger and bigger. In my
This is
mind,
why conspiracy theories are never reality. Is because
This
in order for them to work, there is so much smooth oil that has to go into place. I'm like,
Right.
oh my god.
This is why I try not to be a conspiracy theorist, but obviously fail in every ultimate angle.
Oh my god.
But that's
the
but
coordination that's required is just mind-boggling.
But when you're talking about somebody like Zaire, who's possibly keeping it from some of his quote-unquote closest people, it's almost believable.
Callum, Sidrin, Shishin. Yeah, no, yeah, Black Flag.
Black Flag is also right on that one. That's what
I was.
Had.
Oh, I thought that's what you were saying. Is
Yep.
that he was basically catfishing as Callum.
Yep.
Oh my gosh, my brain hurts. Of course, my brain always hurts when I try to put timelines into this game. So that's nothing really new there. Oh my god, harpies, why are there so many of you?
Yep.
But then that also puts into perspective, that puts into question the whole timing of it too. Like,
yep.
That doesn't answer my initial question of like, when the hell did all this happen?
Sure it does. What did we say last week? We've been thinking hundreds of years. Think thousands, my boy.
Right. No, yeah. Oh god, my brain hurt when I read that. I was like, so Beard and I were kind of shit.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh no.
Yep.
My scope is all broken now. Oh god, yeah. No, I remember reading that and I was like, oh no.
Yep. I gotta say, between Black Armory Papers and then Man with No Name, I was just like, fuck, this isn't like 700 years.
No,
this is like 1,000 to 2,000. We are screwed.
This is so much of a bigger picture than
this is so much further than year 3000. Help.
So are you still thinking that Drifter would have left the system? Well, because see, and the other thing that we have a problem with is Orin.
The time of Drifter's return is another big problem.
I'm still stuck on, when did he freaking leave? Like left.
Well, that's what I mean. Yeah.
He left. If I'm trying to remember off the top of my head, I think he said that they left at the start of the City Age, which Which I have a problem with there because of the information that we have about Orin. Because Orin didn't
the start of the City Age.
Well, there's that too. But Orin didn't leave the system until the start of the Red War. And it's like, okay, so if Orin didn't leave until the start of the Red War, but she left after finding out that Drifter was a lying son of a bitch, and she got pissed off.
That's the time we don't know between two.
I'm like,
I would argue to say,
did she spend like thousands of years just like stewing? And I mean, I guess that's, I don't know.
I mean, at that point, I wouldn't figure it would be thousands of years stewing. I would figure it might be like 100 or so.
Well, but I mean, again,
most of the other events leading up to that portion, if you see like the, like how, yeah, I know where you're going with this portion. We don't know like when the City Age fully and properly started.
Mm-hmm.
So like Drifter's interpretation of the starts of the City Age could be different than what everybody else would kind of perceive it as. Because I think he said that he was a member in Twilight Gap. Because he said, I think that he fought in the Gap.
Did he? Which that's a whole different problem too.
A couple of his voice lines, he said, "Yeah, I fought in the Gap. Everybody fought in the Gap." And of course, that brings up the validity of, well, did you actually fight in the Gap or not?
did you actually? Because if you did, where the hell were you? Because you said you were on the ice planet at the time of the Red War.
Well, and that's where here's here's again why I have a major problem with Drifter leaving the system in that regard and getting back
You know
in
what I
about a
just
year's time. We have NLS drives. Where the heck is he going fast?
You know what I just
faster
thought
than
of?
that?
Well, and this is just a crazy thought, but what if he didn't actually leave the system? What if he was in the hall?
Yeah, that was my next thought. Because one of the, I think it
Because
was,
that would
was it
explain
last week?
that would explain the whole thing about the hall being what was it that Mallory said? It was like the collection of like potential blah blah blah, and so it's like anything
Yeah.
that he can imagine, and he's obsessed with ending the war between light.
Right.
So it would make, actually that makes, now that I'm thinking about that, that actually makes a lot more sense.
Makes total sense. Which is exactly where I was kind of going otherwise, because I still say he never left the system.
Oh, he couldn't.
Which goes back to the one invitation where we see his ship in the ground off of those jade coins.
Yeah.
Like, that's crashed on that planet.
Which that planet, I mean, what is that planet? That planet's within the hall.
Yeah. It's within a gated system that is owned and operated by the Nine, that is possibly dealing again with this idea of a cult and old gods, and I just don't want to.
Well, and the thing is, like, Black Flag, but the technology for anything beyond NLS just doesn't exist. That's the thing, is like even long range haulers are going to have, they're not going to, because we don't have, they don't, well, I mean, I guess as far as we know, as has been explained, NLS is the fastest that they have in game currently. And to peer into and to punch out of the system and back within a year, that's a tall order.
That's the biggest thing that drives me nuts, is the fact that it's not a trip to, but also a trip back. And to add on to this idea, I forget exactly which system it is, but it's a system kind of close to us. I almost want to say it is Alpha Centauri. But they talk about it in the Golden Invitation, how Gaul's forces had ripped through a very close system to ours. And even if Gaul took the 3 or 4 or 5 years or whatever in the time that it took us to communicate with those, we don't know Gaul's ships to actually get to our system. That's my overall indicator here at this point. Yes, it's a gameplay mechanic that they're just like, well, this year we're going to talk about the Cabal. But if you legitimately want to take it down as a timepiece on how Gaul was able to travel through the system with his forces, and at most it would have been 3 years to our system. To go from Alpha Centauri to our solar system currently is about 30,000 light years. That means traveling at the speed of light, it's still going to take you 30,000 years to get here. So, unless we want to go as far back as it's been 30,000 years since all of this started, doubtful. Then of course there's going to be something that is going faster than the speed of light. We can find it possibly in Cabal tech or Fallen tech, etc. But it still seems like it's a very long rate of time before he ends up getting to our system. And yes, Black Flag, that is exactly why my issue with all of this stands. If he is on... If he is on the ice planet when Gaul is here and he traps the Traveler,
how did he
is getting back here from another planet in another system at least 30,000 light years away, bullshit, in 1 year. 1 year. It doesn't happen. The only other explanation you have is that he goes into the hall.
I swear, I think that's
I think that's the explanation, like, period. Or he is utilizing like black holes or something else that still allows for us to travel different places. But as much as Destiny is science fantasy, they've been pretty good about keeping to like space travel to some extent. The only thing that, of course, we have to leave go in that what's the term for it? But our suspension of disbelief has to allow us to kind of allow for like the loading screens to be quote unquote faster than what they actually are for us. That's the only thing that makes me like really ponder what's otherwise
but I mean,
happening.
even then with NLS, you can argue. I mean, there is a degree of reasonable doubt with the concept of NLS, because I mean, near light speed. If we knew, like, I mean, if we had that capability with NLS, I mean, light speed it's pretty freaking fast. And like within the system, we could probably get around pretty good with like, I mean, because it depends on how close are we talking to light speed, right? You know, like, is it half? Is it 9/10? Like, you know, there's near light speed kind of is an open book on interpretation.
It is. Traditionally, though, near light speed would end up being like 0.99%.
Right.
In a lot of, at least like science fantasy or science worlds, at least from like that idea. But no, we don't have like a fully like this is how fast everything goes. We do have confirmation that NLS drives are still used pretty often, though, because apparently I think it's Enoch Bast wants to hook on to the back of a sparrow and use that instead, which I think is hilarious. Real quick on your point, though,
you can't do that, Bast. Oh, you mean you put it on a sparrow? All right, yeah, come to the garage. We'll talk.
Yeah, let's think about that. To your point, though, Black Flag, if again, this is still the possibility that he did go somewhere, and he's the planet-sized object is past the Kuiper Belt. He specifically states that he goes to different systems.
Yeah.
Again, I call bullshit.
Well, but unless he's making them up in the hall, like,
right, like that's the thing that
which would be
to make
an absolute best way to disprove Nezarax too.
Right.
Is he just made it up and visited it in the hall?
Yeah.
God, that makes me happy.
Entirely too much sense.
I like Occam's razor when I can. Like,
yeah, that. Oh God. Yeah, I don't know. Like that's been the missing link for me. Is like,
well, and it was a missing link for me until the video, the dev video that was yesterday, because I think that's where she made the comment that the hall is basically like, I can't remember how she said it, but it was like basically like raw potential. Yeah. And that's why, because she also makes the comment like the scariest thing that he can think up is Oryx, which is why they fight the copy, which that was what I think Anor made the comment of too, is like, it's a very limited imagination there, buddy, but you know, whatever. But that was the whole thing, was it's whatever he can imagine. And yeah, of course then Black Flag. but of course, then, you know, you have the whole thing of like, but why did the 9 give that to him?
Yeah.
Which is a whole different question.
Black Flag, I'll give you Nezarex's tomb is real. Like, we could have come up with something during the Golden Age, but the specific one that he makes mention of, like, Renegade calls it out and is like, I've never heard of that place. I've never been to that place. I don't know what that place is. And whoever thought of that place is the Drifter. At least in terms of like,
it's down the road.
Nezarec and how it is. But yeah, really.
It's on enchilada.
I like that. It's on enchilada. Oh, I didn't know I started talking about Deadpool.
Oh man,
Oh, that was Chimichangas anyway.
chimichangas. That was the best comic when he's like, "Did someone say chimichangas?" Like Deadpool, you have a knife in your head.
Yeah,
Pull the knife out first, then you can talk about food. Did the big shit?
But yeah,
oh my god!
I didn't necessarily put all the pieces together, but as soon as we found out that the hall was from that made me immediately think that there was something up there.
Because again, like as soon as they described it as, oh, it's pure, blank blank. I'm gonna have to go watch that. I want to sit down and like actually transcribe that because there was a lot of little tidbits I think that I think that are very important. But
Yeah.
But I think as soon as she had said that, I was like, that would answer a lot of potential holes.
A lot of questions. Yep.
In there.
And it still leaves up the possibility that he like led a
group in there,
of course, in there.
Especially if they're running from the man with the golden gun.
Yeah.
Now the only problem that I have with that is, you know what? Now that I'm thinking about that, it can't be the hall because he didn't get the hall until after Orn. Oh, you know what? We never had a timing on that. We never had a timestamp on that. So that could that could have all been, well, trying to think. The finer points of it are starting to fall apart because he makes the comment that the light left when they were on the ice planet.
Yeah, which the hall could.
But the hall didn't exist until after Orin, and Orin didn't leave the system until after the light was gone. That's the only possible problem there. Because I was thinking, like, that showdown that we see in the ship when Orin gives him the hall, we don't have a timing on that. That is technically the Shadow who's there. So that could be Shin or that could be Callum or whoever. But if Orin is there, then we know that it is taking place after the Red War, which means that, and he already has the hauler. Pooh. I thought I had an answer. Damn.
What? Where?
Which part?
Where does it state that she does it after the?
It was the Anor, Warlock Anor makes a comment about Orin being a Sunbreaker who left the system after the light, and it also is within Igdisis. I believe it's in Igdisis that there's the comment about the light being gone.
Well, that is Schism, but Schism is not severed. Every other time that we have seen the light was going away, that was the word severed. I guess that would be my only argument on that one.
I mean, and the other thing too is we don't know how far the light can go, because that's a comment from Dead Orbit, I think. Is they're not sure that the light will last with the Guardians after they leave the heliopause.
Right.
Because that's one of the things with Dead Orbit being like, hey, that's all great and good that you're going to help us, but we don't know how much help you'll be if your power goes.
Yeah. Let's see.
But I know Anor makes the comment about Orin. I'm trying to remember off the top of my head. I'm running this.
Yeah, no, there it is. You're right on that idea. A couple Guardians, then the light went out during the Red War, and one last ambitious mind went out in search of Providence, a Sunbreaker by the name of Orin.
Right, yeah, because she was talking about people being obsessed with the Nine, and how it was usually Cryptarchs and.
I have so many problems with that idea.
Oh god, like that line right there, that putting that in that particular piece of the timeline has gunked up all my thoughts on some of the stuff, which I'm like,
I'm
like, no, why did you have to do that? Do we have any idea who
Yeah.
the hunter is in the cutscene? They refer to him as the Shadow.
Still no definitive proof on
as
who it
far
is.
as yeah, I mean, we know I'm almost 100% that it's a hunter because he's wearing hunter gear, but
But we know that Dredge and Yor gave
yeah,
up his ideas.
yeah, I was about to say, but you're also talking about the Drifter, who's confirmed as not having a class. So, yeah.
So yeah, I mean, there's still the ideas that yes, Drifter had in the ship, he has the life forms inside of the ship, which is the other point in contention right now, I know. And that can stand like difference from what the Hall kind of is all about. It doesn't make a whole ton of sense how he can do that round trip. It boggles my mind so freaking much that they would put in something like that. Like if they don't know how like inter-system travel works or what, I don't know. Or if we just need to have something explained to us at this point. But
yeah, or it could be something like you were saying, like a black hole or something. But I would think that he would get called out if that was, I don't know.
Even if it was a black hole, like the wormhole within our system, apparently, that's created, crafted, etc. by the Nine for us to go to unknown space, also doesn't make a shitload of sense.
Well, yeah. I mean,
because Einstein-Rosen bridges are still going to cause a lot of gravity fluctuations inside of a solar system, especially considering that they don't move inside of said solar system. They stay static as to the point of where the system is rotating around a black hole, around our supermassive black hole in the center of our galaxy. But then the planets would kind of come in contact, or God, that's
the gravity well,
Nemesis star and like Sedna situation all over again.
Right, because I was about to say the gravity fluctuations just from the existence of such a bridge would cause massive problems.
Right, and just the fact that my problem with causing it an Einstein-Rosen bridge is all of the junk that's around it. You don't get that without like a system failing or a nebula or something else. Our star system currently wouldn't have all that junk swirling into that hole. Sorry.
Oh, you're talking about the accretion disk on it?
Yeah, by all technicalities. Like that's where it would almost have to be a black hole, not an Einstein-Rosen bridge.
What if he's going into the distributary to use it as a travel?
Yeah.
Oh, really. God. You say that, and now my mind is going there.
Oh, shit.
And, yeah, exactly.
It explains the idea for time dilation.
Yeah. I was about to say, which, well, even if he's using
Why didn't I think of that?
Even if he's using the Dreaming City to skip across the pond, if you will.
Yeah.
Because he doesn't have to use the distributary. But the Dreaming City is a very similar concept. Right. And we know that with the Dreaming City, there's those type of portals that we use to get there. So that would actually... And we know that he and Orin were close. We know that Orin stole things. I mean, that actually does make a lot more sense, too. Yep, that's a good point, Legato. That's a really good point. It does work, actually. Well, it wouldn't be the distributary. It would be the Dreaming City, I would argue. Because I'm pretty sure the distributary is locked out.
Here's the problem in that regard. With how many other gravity fluctuations existed, possibly within our system, was there more that happened that caused these small, minor portals to open up and pocket universe to exist?
Well, I mean, the Hall is a pocket universe.
Yeah, but fuck me. Anguish of Dryston. What is the thing that has caught me up the whole time on Anguish of Dryston? the fact that the first fleet, the lost first fleet of Saturn,
Yep.
which is possibly from Golden Age era, was going into a system that then pops out in front of Oryx.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yep.
Yeah, if they're running with the old theory that Saturn had, because that was the old theory back in the day around Saturn, that it had a small black hole
Yeah.
that was causing the weird storms around
Well,
it.
it was like the
turn up.
explanation for all the weird stuff that was going on Saturn, if I remember.
I'm going to say originally it was the explanation for any weird thing we would run into.
Well, yeah, I mean, yeah, that's very true.
Yeah. It could also explain why, like, the primevals themselves are
ancient,
like older than dirt in a lot of rights.
Though I think also
they are.
Well, that, or it's also because he's imagining them as such. Because I think they made a comment about he's actually summoning the primevals from the hall.
Yeah. Well, except for that first one, apparently.
Which one?
The one where Shadow gets whaled.
Oh yeah, where he which I'm still because see that also has its own problems, because how did he do that then?
Well,
if he didn't have the hall yet.
I guess to be fair, it's the captain, but that's also where they kind of state where, like, the banks and everything were born of the ice world. So I don't know.
Right, which then would point to the fact that the ice world happened before he got the hall.
Yeah.
Which I mean, right. So then if he's using the Dreaming City as basically his own personal teleportation device, that's both hilarious and also aggravating, because that opens up, oh my god, that opens up so much potential for future releases too.
It also makes me wonder why we needed to craft the statue in the first place to get to the Dreaming City.
Well, because the Dreaming City we went through the proper channels.
Yeah.
I bet you anything, like, I think it was Legato made the point of, like, he probably does. I mean, he might not even realize what he's doing.
And to
which
be
would
fair,
only make it better, to be honest.
And to be fair, who does Drifter work with? It seems Spider.
Why?
What did Spider control? Access to the Dreaming City.
Yeah, because Spider did make a comment about that. He's the only thing that stayed his hand is his friendship with Morozov.
Yep. Oh, Savathun is totally at the enduring end of this. Like, if you don't think so, you're crazy. Like, for whatever reasoning behind it.
As annoying as it is for me to say that,
yeah. And the fact that we're getting very close to the end of Truth to Power, if you haven't read that yet, like, you may as well. If you don't think it's Savathun yet, you're dumb. Like, I'm just gonna say it now. You're crazy.
Drifter sneaking around behind us on the Dreadnought. My taken now.
Anyway, fun as this is, I have to get to bed because
I'm gonna try to run this strike for these 9.
Yeah.
Get to go learn about the twins.
Yeah, which side note in tarot,
there are no twins.
Know if you'd seen well, it depends on the deck.
Oh, is it the lovers? Is that what?
Yes.
Okay.
Because that's what
depending on the translation,
I had talked with Anon about it a little bit. The original deck, however, that was constructed in the 1500s, that had the
lovers.
It wasn't up until more recently,
it's probably not until
however.
The French. I just was looking at those.
Not even, actually.
Is it more recent?
Yeah, because most of the after doing like 6 hours worth of research on tarot, I feel like I can go ahead.
The Rider,
and, like,
so it's not as
at this point.
so it's not the Rider White Smith deck.
Right.
Okay, so it's after that? That makes sense.
Yeah, because this was when Frida Jones and whatnot, and like even
Oh,
after all of them had
okay.
put it together.
Yeah,
So
okay.
that this would be more like they're looking at this at like a golden age deck, if you will. So that's what makes me kind of interested on like how it would be, or
That's
like a today deck or something as well.
yeah, okay. That makes more sense.
But
Oh, yeah.
we still
Um,
refer mostly because the Crowley and Frida deck was and is so regarded by the occult.
yeah, well, at least
It's
the
still the
current
one
one.
that we,
Yeah.
yeah, it's still the one that we like largely refer to. It's the Egyptian Osiris deck, I think it
Right.
is, or the not Osiris, but similar. Now I forget exactly who it is. Um,
Yeah, because
but
I
they
was I was
had
going off on my interpretations. I was going off the Rider White, uh,
right,
because that's the large. I mean, for truthful or not truthful, but for like more pure tarot, that's the
yeah,
one that's argued. That's the one of the arguable like first occult decks.
yes,
Um, which is an interesting like history of tarot is really fascinating too in general because
yeah,
tarot is actually not it's not actually occult. It's actually a card
nope,
game. It is actually
yep,
a card game, which I love reading about that. Yeah, Rider White is still very popular. It's because well
oh
now
yeah,
it's I think now it's the Rider White Smith. I think is the one that's being used currently, if I remember correctly.
I think
Um,
so. Yeah, and then the Crowley Frida Jones is the other one that's
yeah,
arguable in
that's
there, but
yeah, it's the one
has
that
been
that's the other one
debunked to
that's
hell is the problem.
oh has it? That's interesting.
Well, it's more so just because of like what Crowley had done and like
Oh
where he
yeah,
was in such a bad spot.
Pass
And how he was
it.
basically just at
Pew
it for the
pew.
cash and
Choo
everything. That's
choo.
the large
no,
question.
say it is not
Yeah,
so.
Crowley after money in a
Yeah.
hard spot. Nightshade.
Yeah, the Rider White Smith I think was. I'm gonna have to look this up because I remember because I had that document that I started putting together. Um, do do
But
do.
getting back kind of to it, the differences in terms of like how the twins are and how the lovers are, there are slight variations between them. Uh, both, however, still indicate that there is something going on with like a relationship in a lot of rights.
Oh my God, there's
Uh,
so
but
many freaking decks.
oh, there's so many different decks, like so many. Um, the problem would be though, is it more of a lovers relationship or is it just a friendship relationship? And that's where
Ah,
the differentiation between twins and lovers kind of comes in, which in one respect makes a lot of sense to how Orin and Drifter acted because they like Orin had Namki beforehand. Like they were
right,
very close. They were those I would consider lovers.
right.
Meanwhile, for Drifter and Orin, they never say anything that was like hugely intimate outside of like the amount of time that they may spend with each other or give up like a lot of information to it. Again, T for teen game, I get that they can't really go too into specifics and get too graphic, etc. Uh, but for Namki and Orin, they gave off this sense that there was something a lot more than uh, just the usual stuff that you would kind of expect from a friendship. Like this was a lovers' relationship, especially with like the Bamberga entry where Namki's like, "Orin, baby, I don't think I'm coming home."
Right.
Anyway, that's my one hang up on that angle. Uh, But yeah, I just find it interesting that they go with the twins and not the lovers. I think that's telling. I'll be interested if all of a sudden they pull out something on the lovers, and that'll really kind of like separate it, but probably not. Also, in before anybody else says that the other voice that is with the emissary is Namki.
Oh, you think so?
Possibly. It would kind of lead back to the Aphelion quote unquote being linked back with the Nine in some regards, though. Like the Aphelion took him, and she went out and found him.
That's a good point.
But then, for some reason, they...
we still need information on what those are.
Yeah. I that's what my 30-minute video kind of goes into. I still argue it's the darkness, but...
Well, I mean, it could be, too. Oh my gosh, karma coins.
Yeah.
Smith White, that's the one I was thinking of.
Smith White, okay.
That's the yeah, I have it up on the stream right now. It's,
Boop.
Yay.
Yeah.
My free gift is waiting. I get 20 karma coins now. I don't know what the fuck that is, but anyways.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the one that I know is still very accepted, because that's like the...
Yeah, this is
that's like a variation
Smith White,
on the original.
Yeah, the Smith White is the reproduction of the Rider White, which was a reproduction of no, not that one. This one. The Rider White Tarot, and then there was an older deck which I didn't put in here. God bless it. Why did I not put that in there?
Yeah, I after the poll, I think this is where I'm going to be going here.
Hermetic, yeah, because the Rider White Smith the Rider White and the White Smith was built in correspondence to the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, which is why you had the flipping of card 8 and 11.
Right. Also, I think why it's considered bad luck to ever show any cards face up before you put your whole spread down.
Oh, really?
Because that's what on YouTube, with the very limited things that I was doing, unless it was like single card showings and like interpretation of like how to look at a card, etc., so on, if somebody was putting down a full spread, it was considered bad luck to have any of those cards upturned, because they felt that was showing a portion of the future, or showing a portion of anything to those that were viewing the cards. So, occult business, getting more into that.
Mm-hmm. Which, I mean, with all the other stuff going on, it's kind of not a surprise.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't want that. Because, yeah.
Night Legato.
Night Legato.
Anyway, yeah, before I sit here for another 30 minutes.
1369, that's what, yeah.
1369, okay.
Was
that makes
the,
sense.
That was the first, I think, no, wait.
First deck.
I think that was the first deck.
Right around, I think it
1377.
was... Yeah.
It described a game note called Ludus Carterum, and then relates the introduction into Viterbo as the Gradient card since 1379. I don't know how accurate this site is, to be fair, but
they, at least the times
the Book
that
of
I
Thoth
have seen
was 1781, was I think maybe when it started.
That's when it really started to become like a measure
cult,
of the occult,
or esoteric, yeah.
Yeah, and then it was with the Book of Thoth, they really built that up,
Tarot
I think,
Marseille,
in like the 1800s.
that's right. That's Tarot Marseille was the 16th century.
Yeah.
That's the one that I think was around before. Because I think, I don't know, these things are, this gets like, you can get lost in this particular history.
Well, that's why Lovecraft is so successful as he is, because he doesn't write legend. He doesn't write stories. He writes myth.
Mm-hmm.
Still so interesting that he does that.
All right, guys. You guys have a great night. We will see you next week. Beard, get some sleep. and we'll talk tomorrow. Everyone else,
Yep.
get some sleep. We'll probably talk tomorrow too. So, anyways, night.
Bye.